And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to tonight's episode of the ZodWriter Show. I am ZodWriter, and we've got a nice full panel today. And before I introduce our special guest, I just want to say we got Johnny and that one Carlos, the two main co-hosts of the ZodWriter Show. And we, of course, have Robert Meyer Burnett.
You know what,
Robert?
I have to say, it's great to be back here with you. We always have great conversations. And is there so much to celebrate this month, or what?
Oh my goodness, you're so right. I mean, it's incredible. It's an incredible time just to be a fan of all this stuff, Robert.
Yeah, it's funny because for me, it's been sort of a double-edged sword, because everything I've ever said about this month in the past has come back to haunt me. But
Robert, I remember the first time I ever had you on the ZodWriter Show, and I just want to bring this up real quick, not to cut you off before I forget.
No, not at all.
But the first time I had you on, and we had you on, my co-host at the time was Victoria, and I believe we had you on March 15th, and it was the Ides of March, because as everybody who listens to the ZodWriter Show knows, I'm a huge Free Enterprise fan.
Well,
it is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I remember you just being excited, saying, the respect that we showed you by having the show on March 15th.
It was great.
Stands out. I love it. So I just had to bring that up briefly.
Well, thank you. And now we're back again. I mean, but it feels like, I feel like in a way we all know what it's like to be blipped by Thanos. I feel like our lives, it wasn't 5 years, it was only a year. But it's honestly, I feel like I've barely stepped out of my ROBVERSATION, aka the garage. And the last year it's been very strange. But what I found really interesting about it, and it's kind of, I don't know, heartwarming, is that I've met and I've kept up relationships with people I've met over YouTube, and the whole fan community has been all different aspects of the fan community has been very vibrant and active and warm and inviting. And I think, we have this extended community of people like yourself and a lot of other YouTubers, and it's been, in a way, it's kind of been uplifting, even though it sucked at the same time. Does that mean anything?
That's a wonderful point. I mean, we talk, Johnny here and I talk a lot about how, 2020 was such a crap year. But like the friendships and the community and the way that everybody's just been forging ahead, doing what they do and just being there for each other has made it bearable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a few years ago, I was one of the few people who did indie comic reviews on YouTube. Now I got all kinds of buddies that do it. I got a whole community and friends on Twitter, and we all support each other and shout each other out. And yeah, I don't know if it would have happened if it wasn't for this darn plague. So it's a blessing and a curse in a weird way, right?
Well, Johnny, what I like about what you just said is I don't feel that we're competitive with each other. I feel that everybody's kind of staked out their own plots of land, their own territory. Like I've always believed, I'm speaking in like gangster terms, but I've always believed that, every person is the king of their own hill. And when you go and visit that person, you're a guest, and you treat them with respect, and you allow that person to be the king of their own hill. And what I've loved about YouTube is that there are so many hills to visit, so many people with points of view and doing different things. I mean, who would have thought? Like, I've loved reaction videos. I've started watching like there are these two guys, they're twin brothers, Twins the New Trend, and they started doing these reaction videos, and they got big this year. And I never would have thought I would watch some, two brothers that are like way younger than me, but derive joy from their reactions to watching music for the first time. And I have. I mean, it was just like, there's so much interesting material out there and so many interesting voices. I feel like every day we're at a great Comic-Con, seeing that there's not going to be a Comic-Con. But, you go to San Diego. I've been going to San Diego Comic-Con for 30 years. And it was always like you go from one room to the next and hear these different voices and different panels and different subject matters. And I feel that's what YouTube has been and done, and it's been pretty great, I have to say. And now we've got Clubhouse. If you're on Clubhouse,
It's like all the great stuff that would be in Comic Cons and that kind of stuff. It's all coming to YouTube and social media anyway. So we're at a point where it's like you can actually travel to these places without leaving your home. So in a lot of ways, the accessibility has gotten much better, but the but it's by design, and it's of course by necessity. So
no, it's true, but isn't it odd that in quarantine, you know, in being isolated from one another physically, maybe mentally and emotionally, we've gotten a closer together, like the whole community.
I agree. Yeah,
you know, I mean, I can't buy drinks for people, and they can't buy drinks for me, so I have to bring my own. But you know, all right then, all good.
Okay, and we have a comment here that I want to read before we get into anything, Robert. So I wanted to tell Robert that I love his short video today regarding the power and importance of storytelling. The way you described the importance of Luke Skywalker and Zack Snyder was radical.
Well, thank you very much, Chubby Teddy Monster Productions. I very much appreciate that. You know, I've been doing that because people have been asking me, because I do these long shows on YouTube, and people were like, can you please like cut those up and do? So I started doing that, and the response has been overwhelming, just cutting up, because, you know, half of my show is reading people's letters, and to get people's letters out, like, it was very funny. One of the short takes went up today. A guy wrote a letter about Zack Snyder's movies, and which I loved, and I read it, and the headline for the article was like, who lets him make these movies anyway? And that was actually a quote from the letter, and people were like, how dare you, not realizing before the short take dropped that it was a total love letter to Zack Snyder's work. And that's why that's why I read it, because, you know, as you know, there was a lot of skepticism about this Snyder Cut.
Absolutely.
And I found one of the most interesting things, like, I spent a long time going over the Vanity Fair article with Zack Snyder. I did a whole stream on it that was over an hour long. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting is when he said that the cut that he took away from, that he had on his laptop, which was almost 4 hours long, that it was black and white, that it didn't have finished effects. And when I was saying, I think it was a matter of semantics, because I was saying, like, look, there is no cut of this movie that exists, because at first people were talking about it like, oh, it was a done deal almost, and all of that has changed. Like, from my perspective, I'm like, look, of course you have a cut of a movie always when you're working on it, but I never believed that there was any nowhere near a finished cut. And my whole thing was like, who's going to pay for this? Because I work in the industry, and I'm like, so. But back in November of 2019, I did when HBO Max came into existence, I said back then, not knowing that in November of 2019, HBO Max had approached the new overlords, the AT&T overlords, Jason Kilar, and had approached Zack Snyder about doing the Snyder Cut. I didn't know that, but I said, now that HBO Max exists, there's an entity that can pay for this. I didn't know it was going to cost over $70 million, but I said, isn't that amazing? And since then, it's pretty great if you think about the fact that the power of fandom, when wielded correctly, and the accessibility of someone like Zack Snyder, who's been very generous with his time. He's gone online with a lot of people to support this, and
yes,
I think synergistically, it shows what can happen when the viewership, the creators, and the corporate overlords all get together and create something that is beneficial to everyone. And I think what we have, what came out of 2020, at least for this whole thing, will be dropped on us worldwide on March 18th, and we can all look back and say, you know what? Here is a triumph of corporate interests, creative and artistic interests, and fan interests. And I have no illusions that if they didn't think they were making money off it, that it wouldn't have happened. Sure, they do, but it didn't have to happen, but it did, because everybody kind of came together, and it's all because of the Snyder Cut movement that began, what, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
It began right after. I was there from the beginning. The Snyder Cut movement began like right after Justice League was released in theaters in 2017.
Yeah. And I think that it's pretty neat. And, you know, I was always a proponent of Man of Steel. I mean, I've been on record, and I said I did a piece where I was talking about how metal it is. And
I absolutely love that. That's why, you know, you saw my tweet yesterday with the metal album.
I love the metal. That was exactly.
You know, and I could totally see where you were going with that, because just the feeling of like being amped up for certain albums, like, and you almost like you can equate it in such a way. It just has that feeling of epicness, that feeling of rawness that you get from a really good metal album, and it just puts you in that frame of mind. Like I totally understood what you were going for, and a lot of people, I think a lot of people kind of, you know, misinterpreted it, didn't see where you were going with that. But when you said that on your show, I was just like, Rob is on the same page. That's exactly what it feels like. It's like, oh my God. Like,
you know, I think about it. It's like Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and now Zack Snyder's Justice League is like Operation Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime. It's a concept album. We now have a beginning, a middle, and an end with a cliffhanger, which I don't have a problem with. But I mean, it's like a rock opera. And when I say it's metal, I mean everything about what's that. Look, Sucker Punch is metal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, come on, man. I mean, this is Buckethead is shredding, you know, on stage in front of everyone. I mean, that's what it is. And that's what we're here for. And I think that's what makes it. The letter I read from a viewer today who is a punk musician was saying the same thing. He's like, if you look at Snyder's movies, especially his DC movies, they're like horror and sci-fi concept albums. It's Iron Maiden meets like Yes, which is prog rock, but meets Metallica, and it really is that. And I think what's great is it's a vision. No one will ever mistake these movies for being anyone other than Zack Snyder's. And there's something to be said for that.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why we're like 4 years away from BVS and people are still talking about that movie. I mean,
and they're re-releasing it in a new version at the end of the month.
Version at the end of this month. Not only that, with the IMAX sequences and possibly new scenes. I mean, I just don't get how it gets any better. I kind of feel like 2021 is the year of Snyder at this point.
Well, yeah, I think it's and what people forget. Here's what I can see. People are like, release the Snyder sequel or whatever. What people forget is Zack Snyder went through a horrible tragedy, went through all of this, and now he's got a sweet deal with Netflix.
Yeah,
you know, a sweet deal. He's got Army of the Dead coming out. He's got a prequel series to that and an animated series.
Yeah.
So this is a huge win for him. Like, I think we should accept the Snyder Cut, the Zack Snyder's Justice League, as an epic win. And I would say I want to say you, the Snyder Cut fans who never their faith was unwavering. But now Zack Snyder has a sweet deal with Netflix that treated him right. So, I mean, while we probably will want to see another Justice League film, that's a whole different kettle of fish that I don't think that would ever happen. Hey, maybe, you never know.
But see, that's where when I laugh about that when people say I don't think that would ever happen, because none of us really thought we were going to get the Snyder Cut. I mean, think about where we were a couple of years ago. Everybody was saying it didn't exist. It wasn't going to happen.
The difference is it was already shot.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the people, the actors had already signed on to do it. If let's say the Snyder Cut was Pluto, a sequel to Zack Snyder's Justice League is the Andromeda Galaxy. It's so far away, but hey, you never know. I mean, what's really interesting is what I would really love to see come out of it. I want to see Ben Affleck make his Batman movie with the Terminator.
That would be a fantastic.
To me, that would be. I don't think there's ever going to be a sequel to Justice League, but I would love it. I would love to see Ben Affleck do his movie Batman versus Deathstroke. I was so into that. I wanted that. I love Deathstroke the Terminator. I've loved him since he was introduced in the New Teen Titans back in the early 80s. I love that character. I love Ben Affleck's take on Batman. I was really looking forward to that film. And I think maybe I could see that happening. And I would think
now, could you see it happening as a theatrical film or as an HBO Max exclusive?
Theatrical film. Totally.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing that I think about knowing what I know about. Here's the thing. The people that own AT&T that owns Warner Brothers now, Warner Media, they don't want necessarily theatrical because it takes away what they want is everybody to be an HBO Max subscriber.
Yes.
So I can see that. And however, anything that's released theatrically when theaters are open at full capacity, if they're successful theatrically, the value of that movie will be forever upped in the world at large. Like when Endgame makes $3 billion theatrically, now and forever, Endgame is a crown jewel of Disney. And if they make a film and it's great, even if they put it out theatrically, they're talking about shortened windows for 45 days or whatever, then they put it on HBO Max. Why not? I mean, I'd much rather I want to see every movie theatrically. I think every movie, it doesn't matter if it's a low budget movie like Nomadland or a big budget film like Zack Snyder's Justice League, every movie is benefited being on a giant screen with great projection and fantastic sound.
And that leads to this great question, Robert, I want to ask you. Stephen Anderson asks, will Snyder usher in a new appreciation for the 4:3 aspect ratio? If so, that's great.
Well, I think that what he says is it's really the 4:3 aspect ratio. That's old NTSC television. But what he's talking about is the IMAX.
The IMAX
ratio.
Yes.
And I think that the real appreciation of the IMAX ratio is in an IMAX theater. Nothing is better. I mean, theaters haven't been open in Los Angeles for a year. Yeah. And I haven't gone to a theater in a year. I would love nothing more than to go to the Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard that was converted into an IMAX screen with laser projection. And it has the most kickin' sound system. I would love to see. I mean, I would wear like a wetsuit if I had to. Like on March 18th, can't they just open the Chinese theater and show us the Snyder Cut in that theater? Yeah. Like, better yet, do one of those Lord of the Rings things. As I said to people, I am going to watch Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Justice League as one thing. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna enjoy. I don't know how many hours that is. 4 hours plus 6.5 plus. Is Batman v Superman? So it's 9.5 hours, maybe.
It's going to be an incredible viewing experience.
Count me in, and I might have to wear headphones so I can really headbang. But it's going to be great.
It is going to be great. What a time we are living in. And Chubby Teddy Master says, dude, many never thought they would see George Lynch go back to Dokken after Beast from the East album. Yeah, that's true.
They were able to put it back together.
and Barcelona B had a great comment up here I want to go back to. She says, growing up, I thought I was the only one who liked Man of Steel. I'm glad people are watching it and learning about it. That's the thing that like is hitting me. It's like you're seeing all kinds of new fans being created out of the hype for these movies. That's the way fandom, that's the way fandom multiplies. That's the way we get to a point where, like, you're always talking about on the Post Geek Singularity, you're bringing, it's about bringing people together and opening up new avenues and horizons and for people and for all those stories that we have yet to hear, right? I mean,
absolutely. And I have to say to Barcelona B, I don't know if she's actually in Barcelona, but just outside of Barcelona, about 20 kilometers south on the coast, is a resort town called Sitges. And every year they have the Sitges Film Festival. Usually it's the first week. It starts the first week of October and it runs for about 12 days. It's my favorite film festival in all the world, right outside of Barcelona, because it's a science fiction, fantasy, and horror film festival. I've been there 5 times myself. It is my favorite. The people there, the fans there, Angel Sala, who runs the festival. If you want to feel the love, and look, if you want to go to Europe, you want to take a trip. Spain is amazing. The people are amazing. The food's amazing. But if you're a genre fan, go spend some time in Barcelona at the end of September and then go to Sitges, because it is one of the greatest film festival of all.
Oh, and their posters are always so great, man. I'm a huge fan of surrealism, so I always see the flyers and the posters for the Sitges Festival de Cinema Fantastique, and they blow me away. Like the little kid holding the balloon bouquet of eyeballs and stuff. I love all that stuff.
It's the greatest film festival in the world. If you're a science fiction, fantasy, and horror fan, it's amazing.
And Barcelona answered the question. Barcelona says, Barcelona is my name, but I have been to Barcelona. So
all right.
So there you go.
Yeah, and, I must say that when you do say this movement and also COVID and stuff, bringing out like a whole new wave of a fandom and new fans kind of investing themselves in this. I could say that I'm one of them. When BVS came out, was that 2015 or 2016?
2016.
Yeah,
16. Yeah. So I was that was March. So I was 15 years old. It was sophomore year of high school, and I actually haven't watched Man of Steel. So I know that's a little sacrilegious, I guess.
You mean even now you haven't?
No. Before that, when I first watched BVS in the theaters. Yeah, but I don't know why or how, but it just resonated with me so much, and I was tearing up when Superman sacrificed himself at the end, and for a long time now, I was looking is there anybody that feels that loves that and and that kind of deep storytelling and very metal, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was craving that for a long time. I didn't know I was craving it. I was just going along my years in high school, and now I'm a college student. But then last year during COVID is when I found out about first was Nerdy in Many Ways. And the 4 Nerds, and I found out about their channel, and that's when I just got invested in all this and the BVS watch party, and then ultimately the announcement of the Snyder Cut. So it's really been a real journey, and it's a pleasure to always have awesome things to listen to from Zod and from yourself, Robert. And
thank you.
It's great.
Well, I mean, what I think is interesting about what you just said is when I was your age, a long time ago, I felt very I was very social and I had lots of friends, but I didn't have anybody. I was kind of an island unto myself in terms of my extreme interests in comics. And before I could drive, I took 2 buses to the comic book store every Wednesday, and nobody went with me. I didn't have any friends that were interested. And I would go to 2 comic book stores in Seattle, and Time Travelers and Golden Age Collectibles. And I was really into this stuff, and there was nobody. And I wonder how different it would have been to have the internet, because, you reach out, like you just said, and you find like-minded individuals and people that pundits you can follow, and you can interact with people. And we didn't have any of that. So there was nobody if I would read, I remember reading, I don't know if you guys know Alpha Flight, the comic Alpha Flight.
Oh yeah.
Canadian X-Men.
Yeah, so at the end of Alpha Flight 12, spoiler alert, a Guardian dies. He gets blown up. And it was one of these things where I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. I was so blown away that John Byrne did this to the main character of this comic. I was distraught. And I remember going down to I read the comic, and I'm going down to talk to my mom about it. I'm like, what the hell is my mom? What do I expect my mom to say to me? I'm like, a comic book character just died. My mom's like, wait, what are you talking about? I couldn't even, I probably was on my way to talk to her. I'm like, Mom, you're not going to. And then I realized I can't even bring this up to my mom, because if she would think I was out of my mind. She would have put me on some kind of like Ritalin or something. I don't know.
I thank God that when I was a kid walking home from school, I had a friend of mine who we used to walk. There was a comic. We used to hang out at his house after school, and there was a comic book shop about a block away. And we used to walk home from school and walk directly to the comic book shop. And we used to do that every week. And it was always such a, such a thing to look forward to. And I go back to what you were saying about, if we had the internet at that point where you're able to actually, connect with people on that level. I mean, at that point for me, internet was kind of a new thing. It wasn't as fleshed out or anything like that. So having that comic book shop and being able to go directly to that place made a difference.
Oh yeah, and there was always and if there was no one in the comic book store, you could always talk to the guy behind the counter.
Yeah.
And it was.
Did you ever go to a comic book shop where the guy behind the counter was actually the owner of the shop, and he had a little room in the back with a cot, and he just kind of hung out there? That was like his.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty normal, actually. Yeah.
I crazy. So I used to go to Wally's Comics in Kirkland, Washington, in downtown Kirkland, and Carl Wallakonis, who was the proprietor, he wound up as one of my college professors when I was at the Evergreen State College, and it was crazy. I'm like, oh my God, it's just, this is amazing. So you just never know. And in this, what's interesting is the reason I call my audience the post geek singularity is because there's a guy named Ray Kurzweil who wrote a futurist who wrote a book called The Coming Singularity about AI, AI, computers achieving sentience. And I thought, well, the geek world that we all that I was in when I was a kid changed.
2045. That's
that's right. But the geek world is we won. Like the geeks have inherited the earth, and all of the things that I loved, comic books, Star Wars, Star Trek, is now the dominant part of pop culture. And when I was a kid, I never thought that would have happened. And so one of the things I always like to say to people is, despite all the problems and everyone screaming and bitching and complaining, Last Jedi this, Kathleen Kennedy that, I'm like, we live in an amazing time to be a geek or a nerd or an imagination connoisseur, as I like to say, because
all that
we have so much great stuff. Yep. There's so much great stuff everywhere you look, whether it's Hot Toys action figures, which are the best superhero action figures ever made, whether it's model kits like the Eagle Transporter from Space 1999 in the best version they've ever had it in. I mean, in 1975, you know what my 1975 self, when I was a little tiny kid, would love to have had this model? Well, let me tell you. And now we have it. Now we have everything. Everything.
So what would you tell your younger self at that age? If you could show your younger self that model, would you do it? And what would you say to it?
Well, first of all, I tell him to don't buy anything, save all your money and buy stock in Microsoft and Amazon, which is a Seattle company, and Starbucks. He looked at me like, what? I go, don't buy all the action figures and all the model kits and the videotapes and the laser discs, everything you're going to buy in the next 20 years. Don't buy any of it. Put it all away. And then in the late 90s, buy stock in Microsoft and Amazon. Trust me. And then by now, I would have been so rich that I could buy as many Hot Toys figures as I wanted, because I would have also had to tell him that all the action figures you want are $250 a piece. And he would look at me and said, what? Star Wars figures are like $4. I'm like, oh, you just wait.
Yeah.
Just wait. Just wait until you're going to buy Darth Maul on that Sith speeder. He would have been like, who's Darth Maul? I'm like, never mind. Just wait. You'll see. But no, to answer your question, I would have said that, well, as my mom would say, my interests have not changed since I was 8. And I would have said, just keep going, do what you're doing. But if you could have separated the fanboy and the professional in you, you'd probably do better than I've done.
I don't know. I was on your Instagram before the show, and I'm pretty amazed by your collection. I saw your laser disc of Zombie Night of the Dawn of the Dead, which is completely beautiful. You got the European version. Oh, there it is, right there. Oh my! Look at that. Now,
People are like, "What's a laser disc?
Right.
What
Now,
is this?"
stocks
But-
and whatnot, man. I hear what you're saying, but that right there makes you a rich man in my book. That is just something of beauty.
I can't reach it. But have you seen the beautiful Second Sight Dawn of the Dead box set they put out on 4K?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, most amazing thing ever. But yeah, it's I've been so into this stuff my whole life that it has been. I mean, it is a pretty. We do live in amazing times. Like
golden
it's
age. It's a golden age, honestly, especially for comic book fans. I'm a huge comic book fan.
God.
And you go and you look at the indie racks. You don't even have to look at Marvel and DC. You just look at like book labels you never heard of, like Scout and Vault, and just the incredible stuff that they have out. And you realize they're low man on the totem pole. There's 10 labels higher than they are, and they all have just amazing book after amazing book too. I would have loved to have been there when I was. But I wouldn't have any money, like you were saying. As a kid, I don't know if I could afford it to read any of the comics I read.
I would not have liked to have been a kid now, because I mean, I was a pretty industrious kid. I started working. I had a paper route and jobs and mowed lawns, and back then I did everything I could to get money to buy models or whatever. And now you can get everything, but it's expensive. You can't get things. Back then, Star Wars action figures, the 3 3/4 inch figures, were like, you could buy as many Stormtroopers as you wanted. But if you want to buy like the remnant Stormtrooper from the Mandalorian that Hot Toys makes, it's $250. And of course, you need like 8 of them, because every respectable figure collector needs a legion or a garrison of stormtroopers, and like you're looking for a garrison of stormtroopers is like $1,500. I could get a garrison of stormtroopers for $25 when I was a kid. I mean, it's such a weird time, but they're the best stormtrooper action figures that have ever been made, so it's a trade-off. But I do think that and look what we've got. You can collect Hot Toys figures, but you can also do Star Wars black figures at the 1/12 scale figures, and they make everything now. It doesn't matter the 1/12 scale, like MA or MFX, the Bandai or the Metacom figures. They make all the X-Men or Mezco 1/12. I mean, they make so much great stuff now. It's amazing. I love it. I'm gonna be dead soon, but I love it. I wish I wasn't as old as I am. I wish I could be like 20 now. But then I would have had to have invested all that money in Microsoft so I could afford to buy all this stuff. So,
I guess this question kind of just switches gears a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier. But the question is for Robert Meyer Burnett. Does he see Toby Emmerich still working under the AT&T HBO Max new bosses by the end of the year? And I guess he's talking about in terms of if the Snyder Cut is a massive success.
Well, first of all, so for those of you who don't know, Toby Emmerich runs Warner Brothers. And before he did, he was at New Line. He has, if you go to his IMDb credits, he was a producer on over 100 movies, some amazing films. He was the screenwriter. He wrote the movie Frequency. If you know the movie Frequency, I think it's, what is it, Dennis Quaid, and it was a Jim Caviezel.
Yeah, good movie.
Yeah,
really touching.
Good movie. Toby Emmerich wrote that movie, which is why they turned it into a TV show. He is very much a man who demands respect, and he has done a lot in the industry. Now, what happened to him is what's happening to a lot of people, because the world is changing. He was on a career path to run Warner Brothers, doing everything he did at New Line, working. They were a subsidiary of Warner's, or they got bought by Warner's, and so he runs a studio. Well, then Warner Brothers gets bought out by AT&T. The merger happens. And the thing is, AT&T is a telecommunications company. They've built the very infrastructure that delivers the internet to our homes and our phones and all of those things. So they own the delivery system. But what they wanted to do was get into the content creation business so they could create content and be soup to nuts and send the content over their own infrastructure. So, but then what happened was Toby Emmerich is like, well, wait a minute. He basically worked his way up into a world that no longer exists. Now it's all about the streaming world. And so these guys, these upstarts, these young upstarts have come in and they're above him, even though he has amazing experience. So the question is what Toby Emmerich is doing now and fighting for his life in the year of a pandemic when you can't release movies. You've become irrelevant while HBO Max becomes the new kid in town, and they're trying to, everything is focused on them. And it was Toby Emmerich's idea to bring all of their 2021 slate to HBO Max and release it simultaneously in theaters and on the streaming service. And because he wants to, it was a good idea, I think, and he's trying to remain relevant because he knows the future. The future is going to be streaming, and it was always going to be streaming. I thought it was going to be 10 years until we got to that point. But the question is,
maybe had not the pandemic happened,
right?
Maybe you're right. Maybe the 10-year trajectory would have been, but like the pandemic kind of put everything on, on hyper mode where now,
yes. And I think the question though is, will he be there at the end of the year?
Yeah,
I think he will be, because there's very few people that work in the entertainment business now that are as experienced and have the background that he has. Very few people. And I always wondered too, just to add on to that, with Toby Emmerich and, pushing back so hard on it, if it becomes a massive hit, and let's just say it does the biggest numbers that anything on a streaming service has ever done, just for the sake of argument, let's say that's what it does. So it does that. Aren't AT&T going to be looking at Emmerich and going to be looking at all the remnants, the people who remain from that time, and saying, well, we don't know what you were thinking back in 2017, but now, you're trying to push you were trying to push a narrative that was negative and counter to what we wanted to do. So you were hurting our bottom line by trying to hurt this movie, and it succeeded in spite of you. So now we have to get rid of you. I mean, that's I look, maybe, but I would say that a guy like Toby Emmerich has there was a lot of different forces at work.
Sure.
When what happened to Zack Snyder was, I think there were two things that happened, and I think they were both on the studio side. One, the studio had my mom used to say, don't let your eyes be bigger than your stomach when I was a little kid, meaning don't fill your plate with food that you can't eat. Well, Warner Brothers had eyes, or they wanted more money than they had earned. And they were looking over at Disney and Marvel. They're like, well, we should be able to make that much money. So they just assumed that Superman and Batman and all of these things that they were doing from a corporate standpoint, on a balance sheet, you look at Batman, you look at Superman, you look at the legacy, and you put them together, or you make a Superman movie and you think, oh yeah, we're going to make way more money than someone like Thor, Captain America, or Iron Man made, because no one knows those characters as well as they know Superman. Well, that's not based on anything other than a spreadsheet and conventional wisdom. You still have to make a great movie. And on paper, everything they did for Man of Steel worked. And I really like the take on Man of Steel. I've been a proponent of that movie since the beginning, but they thought it was going to make $1 billion. They had no reason to think it was going to make $1 billion, because what is that based on? Well, our last Batman movie. Well, what does that have to do with Superman? You need to think of every single movie as a new business. And while you can play analytics with it all you want, or marketing, whatever, it's still something you have to think of every movie as being a new thing from the ground up. And even though Man of Steel, it cost $225 million, and it made 600 and something million theatrically. If they had spent 150 million or 125 million, they would have been sitting pretty. But they spent a lot of money to make that movie. So in their eyes, it wasn't as successful as it should have been because Warner thought, well, we're going to make $1 billion, and they didn't. But there was no reason. They made up the fact that they thought they were going to make $1 billion, and all the executives are patting themselves on the back because they're looking at all this footage. They don't know the difference. They don't know. They just think, wow, this movie looks great. They don't understand the audience. They don't know what people are looking for. So even though the movie did very respectable business and it outgrossed Superman Returns, it was 2 times more successful, even though it cost more, but still they saw it as a disappointment. And Batman v Superman, which almost made $1 billion, it was 800 and something million.
I have a little caveat I want to bring up with Batman, since you just brought up Batman v Superman, Rob. So I don't forget, I have to bring this up.
Please.
Batman v Superman. Aquaman made $1 billion, but Aquaman made its $1 billion because overseas the movie was allowed to run for 9 full weeks. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Warner Brothers cut them off at 5 weeks. They didn't get the full run overseas. That's why they didn't get the $1 billion. So in my mind, that tells me they lost the money because they lost faith in the vision because of all the people who were crapping on the movie. So they basically pulled out early, because if you gave BVS, the full theatrical run overseas like it was supposed to get, it would have made the money. And then there's the fact that they kind of neutered Zack Snyder by cutting out a whole 30 minutes of his film.
They did that too. And I think the movie would have done much better theatrically if they had left it as. But Zack Snyder's smart. He plays ball with the studios the same way that Ridley Scott does. He knows, he's like, okay, I'll make my theatrical version because I'm going to get to release my extended version. There's 3 versions of Watchmen, 2 versions of Dawn of the Dead. I think there's 2 versions of Sucker Punch and 300 as well. So he knows. But in this case, I think that Warner Brothers, they balked. The studio executives, they second guessed themselves. And that was the problem. It was the problem by releasing. They're like, well, we have to release a movie that's 2.5 hours. We can't release a 3-hour movie. And what's so funny about that, that's not based. Here's what I find so funny. That's not based on the movie you have. It's based on, marketing analytics, how many times a day we can show the film. And I'm like, what, if the movie's good, if it's 3 hours long and people love it, it might even feel shorter for an audience than a 2.5 hour version does, and it might have done much better. And I think the problem was, that's it. The studio would interfere, and they're making decisions based not on the movie itself, not on the movie that's made, but they're going, well, we can only have a 2.5 hour movie to get this many showings in a day. And I'm like, it'll play longer if people like the movie. You should always make your decisions based on the film itself.
Right.
And they didn't. And they already have plans. They're moving into Justice League. And the tragedy that befell Zack Snyder was horrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah.
That was just an excuse that Warner had. They got a excuse from God they were already, they're like, we've gone down this road too far. They needed a reason, and they got one. And I think that it was the studio by truncating Batman v Superman and then wanting to get rid of Zack during Justice League was a mistake. They should do just the opposite. If you hire a filmmaker to make a movie, the filmmaker deserves, your shareholders deserve, anyone who's financing the film deserves the studio to get behind it. You don't second guess yourself unless it's going to be a complete disaster, which it wasn't.
Dude, the hate bandwagon that just fell on Zack after BVS was unfair, though. I mean, I'd never seen it. They were acting like he actually made one of the worst films ever when he didn't. I'm not going to lie and say that I'm a huge fan of BVS, but it is a solid 7 out of 10 film. And it was getting treated like it was a 0 out of 10 film, and and it was just all over the place. You couldn't escape it. At least where I was on Facebook, it was brutal. And I felt bad for Zod because Zod was like really into it. And there was a lot of not really nice things said about him in the early days of him wanting to get justice for Zack. So, and I've never understood the hatred towards the man. I think he's a good artist, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I don't either. What I love about his, whether you love his vision or not, it's his vision. It's unmistakably Zack Snyder's vision. And you know, when I saw Man of Steel, I was surprised when I walked out of it. I'm like, that was awesome, because I looked at it as a science fiction first contact story. I didn't want to see another retelling of the Superman myth that I saw in Superman the movie. I want to see something new. And while I was it perfect? I don't think it was perfect, but to see that battle at the end of Man of Steel with the visual effects and seeing the horror, if two Kryptonians were really fighting over an American city, how horrific that actually would be. I was like, I'm like, this is amazing, because I kept thinking about my favorite. I don't know if anyone knows Alan Moore's Miracle Man.
Of course.
Yes. Okay. Miracle Man issue 15, which is where the villain is literally cutting the heads off civilians and sticking them on pikes, and has murdered thousands of people in London trying to draw Miracle Man out. I'm like, when I saw Man of Steel, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, finally somebody is showing us what would really happen if Kryptonians fought. And I when everyone's like, well, why isn't Superman like saving civilians? I'm like, this dude has been Superman for a couple of days. He doesn't even know. He's trying to figure out like what the hell's going on. He all he's trying to do is survive. He's not Superman yet, not the Superman we know. He's just a guy who's trying to figure out like what's going on. And suddenly he discovers he's a Kryptonian, and then suddenly Kryptonians have arrived on Earth and are going to kill every human being on the planet.
3 of the most hardcore ones that ever existed as well, and he's got to fight them. Yeah.
And I'm like, how do people not understand this? Like, well, he's not helping civilians. I'm like, helping civilians? He's helping the whole planet. He saved billions of people. Exactly. Like, okay, there's casualties, there's collateral damage. That's what happens in war. Superman went to war for all of us and saved the planet. I'm like, when people start going, well, he shouldn't have killed. I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Imprison Zod on the moon? What are you going to do with Zod? Like, where's he going to go? It's either kill or be killed. That's what that movie was all about. And I didn't see that compromising the character of Superman. Indeed, he saved billions of people, and he compromised perhaps his own soul, because he'll live with that guilt for the rest of his life. Yeah. That's what happens in the real world. It's not the comic book world. And I thought it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And Snyder Steppenwolf has this question here. He says, hey, ZodWriter, I have a question. Will there be an option where there won't be a chapter format in Zack Snyder's Justice League? I'm just not a big fan of that format. It's only chapterized in the fact that it's there's names. It's broken up into chapters. It's not broken up into episodes like a TV show. It's all one movie. It's just that it's going to have like chapter names like The Big Lie or Big Blue or Superman Lives or whatever. It's going to be broken up into chapter names. If you've ever seen the movie, if you've ever seen Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, that would be a good movie to kind of get you in the mode for what Zack is basically trying to do. Or Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight was also broken up into chapters. So I like thinking of it more as acts, that chapters kind of signify that there is a kind of a like Kill Bill. Kill Bill is a good example. There is a conclusive to each chapter.
Yeah,
but they're very interconnected between each other, and you can't really just have one without the other. And Rel McMillan says people acted like BVS was Batman and Robin. It used to drive me nuts. I didn't exactly love the theatrical version, thought it was okay. It wasn't until the Ultimate Edition came out that I loved BVS.
Yeah.
You know what I also wanted to say just a quick minute ago when Robert was talking about the Man of Steel and the ending of it and the kind of visceral kind of response it gets out of people and fans like myself. That's something that I didn't know I wanted it before until I saw it. And I mean, like I'm 19, so I didn't get it. I didn't grow up with like a lot of metal or different forms of media. It was pretty like par for the course. Like I was pretty much a bandwagoner for the majority of my life, just listening to what's mainstream or just watching what's mainstream. But yeah, like when I saw that, and like I think of like Dragon Ball or comics and other things that are just in my head, that visceral reaction that I wish I would get out of more comic book movies and that scale. Like that's just that's something that I just feast on.
Yeah. And Cisco says, thanks for taking the question, Robert Meyer Burnett. By the way, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan is still the best Star Trek movie ever.
Hard agree. I hard agree. That totally.
Yeah, I mean,
is there anybody who can disagree with that statement?
No, I have to point out my favorite Star Trek: The Motion Picture, but I think Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is the best Star Trek movie.
Of course, I know the plot to Mock Time. Come on, man. My favorite line from Great. I love that movie, man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Rel McMillan says, I used to watch The Last Action Hero on Laserdisc as a kid 24/7.
Oh, man. Not only are you watching it on one of the greatest formats ever, it's one of the most underrated Arnie films ever. I don't get the hate for Last Action Hero. People still shit all over that movie like it's called BVS, and I don't understand it, man. I think Last Action Hero is wonderful. So good on you, McMillan.
And Zever Fett says, nice Bizarro shirt, Carlos.
Thanks. I got a custom print it myself. I love my t-shirt stand at my local mall. I just keep on getting them.
Pow pow.
Nice high quality stuff. So Robert, my question at this point is, what film are you most looking forward to in 2021?
Oh my God! First of all, I probably have to say Dune, because I'm such a Dune fan. But then Die Another Day. I mean, no, Die Another Day. No Time to Die, because I'm a huge Bond fan. I want to see Top Gun 2. I mean, come on, I grew up with Top Gun. I want to see Top Gun 2.
Is it not amazing that Tom Cruise still looks the part?
I mean, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And of course, I know I get a lot of hate for this, but I am a huge fan of the Fast and the Furious franchise. Unapologetically.
Yeah. Right,
unapologetically, and the character, Sun Kang's character of Han Solo, like Soul the city. The fact that they're bringing him back, and there's going to be justice for Han. There was justice for Zack Snyder this year, and there's going to be justice for Han in the Fast saga, whatever it's called, Fast 9. I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to see. Let's see what else is coming. There's Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, and Spider-Man 3 this year. Come on.
Now, are we getting all of those movies? Are we going to get all those movies on demand through streaming, or are any of those movies going to see a theatrical?
I don't know. I think they haven't moved Black Widow yet, and that's supposed to open in May. It depends where we're at.
It depends where we're at. And Black Widow, I'm kind of surprised that Disney didn't move Black Widow to compete with the Snyder Cut. I'm truly surprised, because it's making me think, that I'm starting to think that other studios, especially after watching that, sit down where they had all those execs from all the studios with Toby Emmerich. There's a YouTube video out there, and every time somebody complimented Zack Snyder, Toby Emmerich just kind of rolled his eyes. I keep thinking that it's like all these studios are like polling for Zack Snyder, because they're all vying for Zack Snyder's attention. Because think about it, Zack Snyder has 2 brand new films coming out this year, and the hype for both of those films is astronomically through the roof. And then, like you mentioned earlier, we have the third cut of BVS being released at the end of this month as well.
Oh, I pre-ordered that as soon as it went up. I'm like, give me that 4K, son.
4K.
I mean, I think it's amazing. And I think I keep wondering, because I said they've already opened up this Justice League, and since there's commonalities like the nightmare sequence, what if there is extra stuff that's been put back into the film?
And
What if
Skywalker makes a point here? He says people went into BVS expecting a lighthearted romp and were upset when they had to pay attention. yeah, because you weren't going to get anything lighthearted out of a Zack Snyder DC film. When they hire, and that's the question, Rob, they hire a specific director who is known for a specific type of films and a specific type of vision, what do they expect to get? You're going to hire Ridley Scott to do an alien movie, and then you're going to have buyer's remorse when he does the film, and you're going to get Joss Whedon to come in and re-edit it. I mean, you should know the quality of your talent. You should know what their skill set is before you bring them in.
It's very bizarre. And again, they should have known that. But look, I have to say that the thing about the Snyder Cut, the fact that it's happening, it is a slap in the face. I mean, these studio executives, they have to look like they're in power. Because remember, if you're a studio executive, imagine, put yourself in this position. You get to make let's say you get to make 10 movies a year. That's your job. 10 movies a year, or maybe 12, one a month or something. Mm-hmm. And on these movies, you have to spend $100 million, $150, $200 million. And you're the one that's making that call. And what if you mess up? Mm-hmm. You don't get a chance to like, oh, well, I'll fix it. No. The stakes are so high. So they, from a studio standpoint and from a spreadsheet standpoint, what happened with the Snyder Cut was something they lost faith in their filmmaker. For whatever reason, they're like, oh, well, this isn't working. And by the way, fans it's not like the fan community embraced Batman v Superman or Man of Steel. There was many fans that didn't. They hated it. And they didn't like his approach, which to me, I thought was so strange, because if you watch Watchmen and you watch 300 and you watch Dawn of the Dead and Sucker Punch and Legends of the Guardians, whatever, you should have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get.
Right.
And what I find really interesting about Snyder's movies is there's no other filmmaker in Hollywood, rightly or wrongly, who makes movies that look like his. He's the only one. And his one of the things I've found strange about Batman v Superman, I revisit it more often than I care to even admit, but there's this painterly quality. I mean, clearly he's taking a lot from Alex Ross. He's inspired by how Alex Ross depicted the DC universe. But there is some amazing, I mean, you really are watching the gods of Olympus fighting. And when I say that, it's very mythic. His movies are very mythic, and that's why I said they're metal. It's like listening to a prog rock record, or listening to Operation Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime, or some big Meatloaf almost. Bat Out of Hell. Pick your favorite, whatever, and it feels like you're watching opera, like Wagner's The Ring of the Nibelung, Das Rheingold. You're watching gods amongst men, and it's. If you put yourself in that mindset, it's pretty rad. It's
right.
It's way different than the Marvel universe.
He makes movies of an epic nature that I believe are in a class by themselves. I feel like you can enjoy the MCU. The MCU movies are good.
I love them.
They are, but you have to understand that there's room for everything. There's room for the Snyderverse. There's room for other standalone DC movies. There's room for all these other independent companies to come out and flesh out these indie comics characters. Yep. That's the best part of the world we live in, the fact that all this stuff can coexist. And that's why I'll never understand the mentality of we have to catch up to Marvel. If the idea is just to catch up to Marvel, how do you want to catch up to Marvel? Do you want to catch up to Marvel financially, or you want to catch up to Marvel from a storytelling perspective?
Look,
if you just want to catch up to Marvel on a storytelling perspective, they got the director of the first two Avengers movies to come in and redo Justice League. And we see how that turned out. So that should tell them that that was a failed experiment, and that's not going to work. DC has to carve out its own identity and has to be its own thing.
100%. And that's the funny thing. They should have just concentrated on what they were doing. You know, it's funny. In the 1970s, a lot of people had vans. You know, they don't really have vans anymore, but on
vans with free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, right. And on the vans, on a lot of people do these beautiful
murals.
If you had a van, yeah, beautiful airbrushed murals. The Snyder's movies, Zack Snyder's movies, whether it's Sucker Punch, whether it's 300, whether it's Watchmen, especially Batman v Superman, it's like every frame could have been a van painting. Yeah. You could take your superhero imagery and somebody would just do an amazing van painting, or the hood, the side panels. I mean, that's what Zack Snyder's movies are. When I was a little kid in the 70s, there were vans, you know, and if you were like a total rad, like Matthew McConaughey's character in Dazed and Confused,
Wooderson.
If Wooderson was in high school in the 70s, Wooderson would have had a van, and he would have had like Frank Frazetta girls painted on the side with like the Death Dealer from Molly Hatchet's album that they make action figures on, the giant axe, you know, and that's what he would have driven around in, and he would have had like a plush carpet in the back, because when the van's rocking, don't come a knocking, you know what I'm saying?
And a water bed.
Yeah, it would have been just like that. That's what Zack Snyder's doing. I mean, look at him. Just as a dude, he himself is yoked. He works out. He's got a beautiful wife. I mean, that guy is metal through and through. He's a headbanger.
Yeah, and look at this. Look at this comment, Robert, right here. Zach has said multiple times that he was influenced by heavy metal comics when he was young.
Well, he was actually saying that he wanted to make a film, a live-action heavy metal magazine movie, which I think would have been amazing. I wish that he would have pursued something like that. I know Warner Brothers kind of roped him into doing these Superman films, but I think a lot of his ideas before tackling those were way more amazing, because he was getting into European sci-fi in a hardcore way. And I think that if they would have let him make that, we would be having a different conversation. We would be embracing him kind of as the new Ralph Bakshi, but instead of being an animator, Zach actually does this stuff with real people, and it looks just as amazing as what Ralph Bakshi did in the 70s. And I think that that's the tragedy here, is that they forced him into a round peg, and he did the best he could with it, but he's a triangle, and he's amazing as a triangle. And I think that after Army of the Dead and he kicks ass on Netflix, he will be embraced as the wonderful triangle that he is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Netflix will probably, if Army of the Dead works, he's already got that prequel series and an animated series. Netflix is all in on Zack Snyder, and they love him. I mean, the people that look at, like Dave Chappelle talking about the relationship he has with Netflix. Netflix is like, if they have great creators. I mean, I've been working in a small way on a Netflix anime series I'm very excited about. You can see it on March 25th, the 8-episode Dota Dragon's Blood. Yes. And working for my friend Ashley Miller, who created the series and the showrunner. Netflix has been nothing but supportive. I haven't heard Ashley say a bad word about Netflix, and I think Netflix is pioneering. Look, if you know what you're getting with Netflix, they're allowing people a lot of leeway to do what they want to do. And it's an amazing situation, because the stakes are not as high in terms of, they'll give you a lot of money. They'll give you the money you need to make your project, and they want it to be great, but they know they don't have to put up theatrical marketing for it. They'll put it up and people will discover it, and it'll be on their platform forever. And if it does something like The Queen's Gambit and everybody's talking about it and watches it in the first 2 months, that's huge for them. And they get more subscribers, or if they get like 100 million people watch The Queen's Gambit, that's a huge deal for them. So they're like, okay, they carve out how much, whatever that costs based on how many subscriptions they have, which is over like 200 million now. And they know exactly from 1 month, how much did this cost? And Zack Snyder's somebody that they're probably going to be like, well, this is pretty awesome. I'm sure Army of the Dead's going to be huge. And then they're like, well, Zach, you know, you can make whatever you want. We're going to cap your budgets at, say, I don't know, 125 million or 150 million or something, but you can make whatever you want. That kind of freedom doesn't exist in the studio system at Hollywood, in Hollywood. And that's why these streaming services are so unique and they're so new. And that's why someone like Toby Emmerich and Walter Hamada, I think, look, Walter Hamada has done a good job allowing things like, whether you love Shazam or not, Shazam got made, Joker got made, Aquaman got made. All three of those movies together are bonkers.
But Warner Brothers had no confidence in Joker, just like Warner Brothers had no confidence in Zack Snyder. Look at the parallels there between those two.
Well, because the problem with that is everybody wants to look at something that came before. So they're like, oh, this is like that. Even the way movies are pitched in Hollywood, people are like, it's Die Hard at an amusement park. And people are like, oh, I get that. Okay, it's Die Hard at Disneyland. So people understand no one in Hollywood has vision. They can't see something unless it's already been done before. They can't see it. So when you have a true visionary, like when a Christopher Nolan arises within the studio system, then, Warner Brothers didn't think Inception was going to work. Warner Brothers marketing said, oh, we saved that movie. Nobody would have gone to that movie. That movie made almost $900 million. And it's because Christopher Nolan made it. The studio, when the Wachowskis were going to make The Matrix in 99, 98, or whenever they were going to make it, the studio didn't really get it. But the Wachowskis were so well prepared with all of their like Jeff Darrow storyboards and all that stuff that they're like, well, we're going to bet on these guys because they know what's up. And they got The Matrix and they made it for $65 million. Can you imagine? Like, well, I hope these guys can knock it out of the park. I mean, they'd written Assassins for like Richard Donner and they'd made one movie, Bound, which is a great movie, but it's a small movie. And then Warner Brothers can you imagine being the executive who greenlit The Matrix? I think it was Lorenzo de Bonaventura, I think. And then you get to see that movie finished. How smart do you look?
Exactly.
I mean, and that's
I kind of feel like that's where we're headed with the Snyder Cut. The Snyder Cut is going to be a super huge hit. It's going to surprise a lot of people. And when that happens, the people that were in support of it and said, let's green light this. This is a good idea, are going to look like geniuses. And then people like Toby are going to be looking like, well, I thought we were back then was a different time. We were going for a different thing. And Skywalker makes a great comment here I wanted to read. He says, BVS Backlash showed me how important it is to voice my opinion in this new generation. Because everything tends to get drowned out by a vocal minority. So when you show that something is important and you keep pushing something big like that, I mean, I would not be surprised, Robert, if we're in a situation where we get a Matrix-like kind of reaction here to the Snyder Cut.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Because I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And I'm fascinated to see what could happen with this. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see where it's all coming from. Because, first of all, can you imagine? We're getting a 4-hour Justice League movie. Like, in my wildest imaginings, I can't even believe that we're getting this. That it's 4 hours long. I mean, listening to Zach, because he's talking a lot when he's talking about the battles he had to fight with the studio, because the studio lost. Imagine his frustration where he makes Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. Everyone thinks he's the shit. I remember reading reports that when Batman v Superman was first screened for Warner executives, they couldn't believe it. They were over the moon, going, "Oh!"
I think they got like a standing ovation after he showed it to executives. They thought it was a good movie.
They did, and then they start second guessing themselves and all that, and then they move into Justice League. It was only after the critical drubbing and the fan reactions, and it's so. What I find so strange to me is that when I go see a movie, I don't think about comparing it to another movie.
No.
When I sit down, I'm like, I'm going to watch this movie for what it is. I've read enough comic books in my life, thousands and thousands of comic books. I've read all kinds of Elseworlds tales about Superman or Batman, Gotham by Gaslight or Superman Red Sun or whatever.
The Nail. Yeah, there's so many good ones.
I have The Nail. I love the Batman. Or Batman, the Cult too, that Jim Starlin did. So when I watch something, I go in totally with my eyes open going, I wonder where this is going to take me. So what was funny was after Man of Steel, there were all these people that had all these criticisms. And I'm like, yeah, but your criticisms aren't based on the movie that you watched. They're based on what you wanted a Superman movie to be. And I'm like, I really like this realistic science fiction portrayal of Superman, which I hadn't seen before. And I thought it was neat. I really liked it. I love the whole opening. I love the whole, like one of my favorite things in any movie is seeing Kal-El after he rescues all the people on the oil derrick floating in the ocean when the whale swims by him. I mean, like, that was amazing. And how do you not like that? Sure. Is it the same thing as Richard Donner's Superman? No. Is it the same thing as the first episode of Superman and Lois? No. But it's its own thing. And as its own thing, it's really compelling and interesting viewing. So why are you comparing it to something? Why is it relevant to compare it to something else? Like, I don't compare one cop show to another. Like, I like French Connection. It's a cop show. Cop movie. I love To Live and Die in LA. That's a cop movie. I love Lethal Weapon. That's a cop movie. Beverly Hills Cop, another cop movie. They're all movies about cops. They're all very different. I don't sit there and go, well, To Live and Die in LA is not nearly as funny as Beverly Hills Cop, so I'm just not going to like To Live and Die in LA.
Good point. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
And Simon, he makes a good point here. A question he asks. He says, "Why did Warner Brothers expect BVS to make $2 billion when it was the second film in the franchise? And if they did expect that big of a box office, they should blame themselves for that."
Yes,
well, Batman and Superman, those are huge names. I don't want to make a case for them or play devil's advocate, but you would kind of think that, if Marvel is being able to pull this kind of money out of Iron Man and Thor, which nobody really read before the movies came out, then DC kind of should have been able to do it with Batman versus Superman. But like we said, there was an entire there was a hate mob against that film before it came out. I don't know what was wrong with BVS, because I will admit it had its problems, but it did not deserve like that hate, that flash hate that it got, and the Rotten Tomatoes scores. And I knew so many people who didn't go and see it, didn't learn for themselves, but would just sit there on Facebook and poop all over it like they knew what they were talking about. And I'm just like, this is how we do things now, huh? We don't watch it ourselves, like it's.
Well, I've said this before. I think that the critical reviews for all the negative reviews from the people that hate Zack Snyder and hate these movies have already been written. The movie's not even out yet, and the hate reviews have already been written. They're just waiting to press send on those emails because we're at a point where these critics do not actually watch the movies anymore. They're paid to write an opinion based on whoever they're serving at the time.
I think you're absolutely right about that. I think there are people that are going to go after this simply because of what it represents.
Yes.
It could be Lawrence of Arabia.
It's a victory for fandom.
Yeah.
That's why I think everybody who's ever supported an indie comic book, an underdog, a small movie, an independent movie, anybody who's ever supported anything like that should see the Snyder Cut as a victory, because we all know that years ago there was no way. We all thought, nobody really thought it was happening. Even the movement we were fighting for it every day, being told constantly that we're chasing after vapor. It's not going to happen. This is the studio will never let this kind of thing happen. And it's one of those scenarios.
But they were right though. They were right. Warner Brothers was never going to let it happen.
They were never going to let it happen. If it wasn't for the AT&T buyout, it never would have happened. And I've come to terms with that. I've come to accept that if it was just Warner Brothers left up to their own devices, we would not have gotten this movie.
No, and what's frustrating for me now is every single day on my YouTube channel, somebody leaves a comment that, oh, you didn't support the movie. And I'm like, it's never, I've been a Man of Steel supporter, and I've talked about Batman v Superman the whole time. But from an industry perspective, I'm like, this is never going to happen.
You and I had all these conversations, Robert. I remember you and me, and I remember going back and forth with you myself, because I remember thinking, oh my God, what's wrong with Rob? Why doesn't Rob support this movie? And but then it's like, the more you and I talked about it, the more I started to understand where you were coming from and why you were feeling the way you were. It wasn't because you were against Zack Snyder. It wasn't because you didn't want this movie, but you were looking at it from a financial perspective,
an industry perspective,
perspective, like who's going to pay for this, and is it? And they're in these studios, they are not going to want this movie to come out because it's going to make them look bad. It's not about whether or not you know, we want it to happen. It's about whether they're going to allow it to happen. And from your perspective, that was not going to happen.
No, and I'll tell you the real perspective that I was coming from is, I knew working in post and all that there's a lot of people, I think, in the movement, the release of Snyder Cut movement, who didn't quite understand, because they're hearing the movie's done, there's a cut, so they're assuming that's what that is.
That's what it was. That was what it was for me. I'm going to tell you the truth. It was like, we have, on the one hand, we had Zack Snyder on his Vero social media platform telling us it's done. I have a cut. It's done. It's ready to go. It's up to the studio to release it. We've actually got Zack Snyder on video saying this.
I know.
So then when we had people saying, well, it's not finished, the special effects aren't done, it's going to cost this much to do, that much to do. My whole argument with that was that I didn't feel like, if that was the case, Zack Snyder's not going to say it's done if those types of things that still have to be completed are going to actually hinder the movie from being released.
Well, I think, you know, here's what I think, that there was a big disconnect, and it all comes down to semantics.
Right.
So when you're working on a movie like Batman v Superman, pretty much every single shot in a movie like that has some kind of effects work done. And what you have to do is, when you're cutting a movie like this, you have to cut the scenes together and finish those unfinished cuts. Your cut has to be completed. And then, because every frame costs money. Like, think about this. There's 24 frames in every second of film, and each frame has to be rendered out. It's not just, you don't just take it. So every frame is a separate render.
Mm-hmm.
So when you've cut your movie together, you cut the live action scenes that need green screen and whatever, you do what's called, you turn over your shots to the effects company. Now they don't do it with handles. They're not putting in a full second or two, 90 seconds of frames on either side that they're rendering out that you can cut out. They expect your cut to be exact. So where Snyder is that he's got his cut. My cut's done. I've got my cut. What he wasn't saying is that, yes, my cut is finished, but I need to turn it over to the effects company. Do you know that? If people listen to what he said, actually Deborah Snyder said this, there's over 2,650 effect shots they had to finish. Do you know how many effect shots were in Tenet? 350. 2,650, and they had to do it in 6 months. Yeah. Most movies ever made, pick your favorite visual effects extravaganza, I'm willing to bet it didn't have 2,650 effect shots.
Avatar.
There you go.
So the Iron Man
that had more, but I mean, this is an enormous amount of work. Now, in Zack Snyder's mind, he basically said the cut that he had on his computer, the black and white cut that's 4 hours long, that was his cut of the film. He only added 4.5 minutes to it. He went and did these reshoots.
Right, Yeah, that was just additional photography because
Yeah.
he had that one little bit that he wanted.
That was like
Yeah.
a pickup. He got that. He put the Joker in there. But for the most part, he did have his cut. He did have a finished cut of the movie. It was no, and he even said it. He's like, this was never going to be shown. This is his own words. And he gives the 3 reasons why he was never. They're like, well, why can't we just release the cut the way you have it right now? And the best reason is he's like, are you kidding me? I would have been pilloried releasing an unfinished cut, and you could have pointed to me and said, see, it wasn't that good anyway. Yep. And by the way, none of us, I don't care who you are. I've had people say, well, we just wanted to see the unfinished cut. I'm like, no, you didn't. You don't even know what it's like to watch an unfinished cut of the movie. You wanted the finished version, and Zack Snyder would never give you an unfinished version because it's not done. No filmmaker wants to show their work to people that isn't finished. No one ever wants to do that.
But doesn't every filmmaker say, because Zack Snyder himself had said this, that no film is ever truly finished. It's like you always, as a filmmaker, you always have things you'd like to add or you wish you did differently. I'm going to ask you this now and switch gears a little bit, because you talk about your movie Free Enterprise, and I talk about how much I love that movie. And the last time I had you on, I remember you said that you would like to at some point revisit that film and do, I think, a third cut of the movie, because I still have the DVD. I still have the DVD of the 5-year mission, the special edition after the first initial home video release. And you said you'd like to go in and do some tighter cuts, and there's some things you would like to do that if you had a chance you would go in and do that. Is there any chance of that happening? Just for me as a fan.
Okay.
And if not, can I see it, Rob? Because
it's funny you asked that, because on my I'll flat out tell you this. There is not one edit in Free Enterprise I wouldn't change. Every single edit. And I'll tell you something. It's very subtle. Some of the edits I would change by mere frames. But I would also change the entire aspect ratio. Since we all know what aspect ratio is now, I wanted to make Free Enterprise a widescreen movie, a 2:3:9:1, a widescreen aspect ratio. And on my YouTube page, I think there's 5 scenes that I have done that I've recut. You would probably not even know what was done to them, but I changed the aspect ratio. And I recut them the way I want it to be. And what I would have to do is, Mark Altman and I don't own Free Enterprise. Our executive producer owns Free Enterprise, Mark Gottwald. What I would like to do is I want to buy Free Enterprise from him and do a 4K transfer and do my definitive version of the film. And if you look at the scenes, my YouTube page is the Burnett work. And if you go to the page and you go to video or you go to playlists, it's one of the top playlists. You can actually see I took some key moments in the film and I did my recut I reframed it for widescreen. And like the sequence where they meet Shatner for the first time in the bookstore, I recut it. It's very subtle. I just speeded it up a little more. Fans of the film I think it feels better. I think it looks better because in my mind I was composing for widescreen. And I would change the whole thing around. And here's the thing. Free Enterprise, the people that love it, but it's not like it's a beloved cult classic the world over. And I think
it should be. It should.
Yeah, it damn well should be.
Thank you. Guys are very kind. But I think if I was able to go in and redo the movie, there's only 2 scenes that I would add. And by truncating, part of the problem with Free Enterprise, I think, is the pace. But if the way I want to change it, I mean, if you change every scene by, the movie's close to 2 hours, the version I have it now, and it's on that you have the 5-year mission extended edition. If you were to cut that down, I think I could get the movie down by 10 minutes and you would never know it was missing. Just by the simple nip and tucking that you want to do. Yeah. Yep. And I think it would be a better film. And I think that my final version of the movie, and then I could put it out on a Netflix and people, although then I would probably get Me Too'd for the deeply there's some deeply misogynistic moments in the film that are supposed to be
There
funny,
but they're amazing and they're funny.
Yeah, I wouldn't. By
And
the way, I would not cut them out.
You just gotta look at where where you are at that time and where we're coming from. I mean, I've said multiple times that I almost feel like the scenes where you and your friends go to the Toys R Us and are hanging out in the Toys R Us, I feel like those scenes were taken right from my childhood because I had those exact same experiences. So it's.
Yeah, you very rarely saw a girl inside a comic book store, let alone buying a Sandman or a Preacher hardcover. So if you were a dude that saw it, it was a miracle, like the movie showed. Yeah,
and it was actually
Claire was a unicorn. I'm gonna say this right now, especially back then at that time. Now it would be it's like you can find Claire's are like a dime a dozen nowadays because there's fangirls all over the place.
But there weren't.
But back then, no way.
Yeah, and she was based on a very specific girl I actually met at the San Diego Comic-Con, and I was like, and she came up to me. It was a very interesting experience, and so that's what she was. But yeah, so I always felt. By the way, the technology back then was different than it is now. So I could actually, it's much easier to make the movie the way I'd want to make it now.
Did you use the Avid to edit that?
Yes, but
I had some experience with that, and I thought I kept thinking that you may have, because I was looking at certain scenes, trying to figure out which ones you used certain techniques on. So
yeah, but the thing was, we actually cut negative.
Okay.
So a lot of that was part of that, and now what would be great is because you could do it all digitally and then finish as a file. So you wouldn't have to send it to a negative cutter that literally has to cut the celluloid. And I think that there are things in it that I would just do a little bit differently. I think it would be a better movie, but because it's kind of forgotten. I would think it would be, if we'd had the internet when it came out in 1999, it would have been I would have had, I think, a bigger career. But it's not like I'm down and out. But still, I mean, it's yeah.
It was ahead of the curve. I remember. I forget what movie magazine it was, but like I remember, I legit had the trailer for Free Enterprise on the same disc that the short Troops was on.
Yeah, what that was? That was Chris Gore's magazine that he was God, what was it called? I love that magazine. It came with a CD or a DVD with all those trailers on it. That was awesome.
Yeah, and legit, and there was no nerd movies being made then. Like, you got that disc, and there was Troops and the trailer for your movie with William Shatner rapping about Caesar and stuff, and you're just like,
yeah.
As a nerd, you were just like, dude, when did they start making movies like this? And then you find out that they wouldn't for another 10 years, but these two guys were ahead of.
I consider Free Enterprise to be the true birth of Robversations, because when I look at that, that's the inception. That's like it's about to come out of the womb. I mean, you're looking at all of the stuff that happens in that movie. So many of us growing up around that time could relate.
Yeah, it was a legit nerd movie.
What was happening, and I'm telling you, to this day, it's like I've watched this movie with so many different people, and everybody looks at me and says, I could totally see that. And I remember watching it with some friends I grew up with. Was like, yeah, remember when we used to do that? Remember that, right down to going to the Mexican restaurants when you were depressed and you were there was always a Mexican restaurant 24 hours open in the middle of the night when you were going through something you would go to, and you'd sit there and you'd muse about whatever you were going through at the time. And it was always, it's so relatable that I wish that it got its due, that it would get that release, because I'd be the guy screaming through the roof, screaming from the rooftops, this is the greatest thing ever. I get so excited. I mean, every time I revisit the film, it's nice. I have a very nostalgic, strong feeling for it. So
do you know that William Shatner is going to be 90 years old on March
uh-huh.
22nd? 90. And I think back that we did that. Like I feel like I really wish I've been trying to raise money to like, I have to buy the negative to do the work I need to do to get the movie out for his 90th birthday. But maybe if I can get it out for his 90th year, my big goal in 2021 is to get the free enterprise negative. It's really expensive just to scan the movie and get everything scanned into the digital arena. It's like about $100,000. I need probably, it depends if Mark Otwald, who owns the movie, would sell the movie to me, but I would need about 400 grand to do everything I need to do to the movie. And
hasn't he thought about the movie getting a re-release? Have you had conversations with him about what you wanted to do? I mean,
no, I haven't. The problem is he's kind of out of the entertainment business, and the movie's really been sitting on a shelf since 2006, since I put that together. And the only way you could see it, there was an old 4x3 transfer of the original version that's really not good. That was done.
I thank God I still have my DVD.
Yeah, that DVD was out of that was released in 2006. It's a 15-year-old DVD. That was the last time. And what's interesting is, if you think about it, 10-year-olds people who were 10 when the DVD came out would be 25 now. And so the last time the movie came out, it is, if I do say so myself, it's so it's a movie steeped in geek culture. And one of the things you'll notice is that the movie, it would be a period piece. It takes place in September of 1999. And people would ask, well, why does it take place in September of 1999? Because everyone knows on September 11th, 1999, the moon, the moon base Alpha and the nuclear waste dumps on the moon exploded and blew the moon out of Earth's orbit in the series Space 1999. So as a geek reference, the film would be set in September of 1999. So at the beginning, instead of saying at the near present, one of the things that I would change is it would say September 13th, 1999. So people knew that, okay, we're now 22 years away from the movie. So they would understand, like, there's a Woody Allen, Mia Farrow joke in the film that would play very differently now than it played when the movie came out. And I am not going to change that. So
but this is the thing. And then, like you said, there's only a couple of scenes you would add or whatever. And when I go back and, like I say, I revisit the movie, it's like it brings back a rush of so many different memories. And it would just be nice for a whole new legion of geeks and nerds and all that to see this movie, because I just don't think that it ever got its just due.
Yeah, like you referenced Dazed and Confused earlier. When in the 90s, we had films like that. We had Empire Records that represent this year, this time in the 90s. And Free Enterprise was basically that, but not for music hipsters, for comic nerds and for sci-fi fans. And yeah, were we a little cringe in our culture at the time? Sure. We were gatekeepers. We were a little over the top with our hormones, but you know what I mean? It was a different time and it was a different place.
And who can't relate to going to a midnight screening of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan and getting kicked out for being too rowdy?
By the way,
who cannot relate to that?
That's a true story. What was that happened?
What was the movie that the chick said that she only liked to watch in pan and scan, which I think is like one of the greatest lines ever?
Oh, Harry and Gabrielle. Yeah, Harry. They were married at the time, and they're both TV writers. They're married to different people now. So it's it's very much, it's funny. What that really represents was Mark Altman, who I made the film with, and Chris Gore, who does Film Threat. They had started a magazine called Sci-Fi Universe. And it was called Sci-Fi Universe, the magazine for fans with a life. And it was all about, and this is in the mid-90s. And the premise was, this is for all the hipster sci-fi nerds. I don't know if there were any, but we fancied ourselves that. And it was a group of people in LA. We were all friends, and Free Enterprise really came out of that. because I had met Mark because he was writing for that magazine. And so it was the writing staff of that magazine, and all of us, we'd all moved to LA, and we were all working in the entertainment business trying to make movies and all that. But we all wrote for this magazine, and we consider ourselves like the hip geeks. And back then there weren't any. I mean, even when Big Bang Theory came out, they weren't cool. You know, the characters, we thought we were cool.
You know, Free Enterprise.
We weren't.
But the funny thing is, though, Free Enterprise depicts it the way it was. At least for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it was. That's exactly how it was. From the friendships to the weird friend with the bizarre quirks, with the one being kind of like a womanizer. And I idealistically, when I look at that movie, it's amazing how much of the movie I can relate to in a positive way and kind of a negative way too.
Yeah.
And you touch on it all so brilliantly. It's like every time I go back, I'm reminded about how they just don't make movies like this anymore. There's nothing like this. You're not gonna. It's like you said. For example, the Mia Farrow joke. You know, that kind of stuff would not play well in today's. There's at least, and I could do a whole video on the top 27 things from the movie Free Enterprise that will get Robert Meyer Burnett canceled.
And there are a lot.
I mean, and that's just 27 things I could think of, like right off the top of my head. Hell, the scene with the
green girl
with the Star Trek ornament. Where they're fighting, and she takes the Star Trek ornament and she leaves. That scene, was the scene that my wife laughed her ass off. She sat there like the whole movie. She sat there. I remember she watched the movie with me, and when that scene came up, there was just like this uproarious laughter, like. Almost like she could relate to it, and it was like you threw that in there for the women, so that they could be like, so that they could have that one up. Like it was.
Well, there's the other one with the red-haired Lori.
Yeah.
What's really funny, Lori Lively. You know, it's really funny. Lori Lively is Blake Lively's older sister, Ryan Reynolds' wife.
Mm-hmm.
And that's her. And it's when she's saying to Robert the whole conversation about the wedding rings and all that. It was because, you know, those are real conversations that we were all having at the time. Like nowadays people get it. Like nowadays the world is so different now, and people don't get that. Like, and it goes back to the Snyder Cut. Like we as fans, we have everything we could possibly want.
Exactly.
We have everything. I mean, a land of riches, whether you name it. You got Mondo doing amazing movie posters you can buy. You got Hot Toys making the Ferrari of action figures. You know, you've got 4K transfers and the video game technology. My God, is it incredible?
We've got home arcades for our houses. It's unbelievable.
Anime dub sub simulcast from Japan to America the same night. You don't have to wait 2 years for an anime to get released over here anymore.
Or buying bootleg. It's just insane. Like Crunchyroll. I look at this stuff and I'm like, my God, it's unbelievable where we are now. And
a Free Enterprise sequel taking place in the modern day.
Well, we did write it.
Unbelievable. Oh, I know. You told me that story, and I really wish it could happen. And because I'm like, any chance to get more of that world would be fantastic. Especially
I would love
this
to do
day
it.
And age.
It wouldn't be that expensive. That's why, you know, it's something. What's really interesting too is that doing a Free Enterprise sequel could be so relevant to today. I mean, we wrote
and you
it.
Guys you could even talk about cancel culture.
Oh yeah. I mean, we would absolutely do that. I mean, it would be because now Shatner's become such a firebrand on social media.
Yes.
You know, and
you could start the movie with one of Shatner's tweets.
And that's something we'd have to incorporate in the film. I mean, it would be so funny. and he's still very with it. I mean, I would still love to do that. I mean, it would be so interesting. But you know, I look. It's funny. I've thought a lot about the sequel, and it came out in 1999. The movie. It's 22 years later. I look at Danny Boyle's Trainspotting 2. I loved Trainspotting 2 is great. And it is exactly the kind. If I was going to say, okay, if you're going to make a sequel to Free Enterprise, it wouldn't be like Trainspotting, the movie, but it would be that kind of a vibe. And I thought Trainspotting 2 was so good as a sequel to Trainspotting, and that's what you would go for. I mean, it's Joe McIntyre says September 1999. That's a mind-blowing level of nerdiness. That's like November 2019, which is Blade Runner, and October 21st, 2015. Oh man.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
But that's what Free Enterprise, the level of nerdiness, it was that nerdy. But back then it was a novelty, and now everybody's that nerdy. You know, like the fact that people know that Blade Runner was in the past now. It was November 2019. Now it's
Rob, have you ever thought about, and this is just an idea that I have in my mind, have you ever thought about doing a ROBVERSATION sanctioned Free Enterprise watch party?
Oh, you know what? I've talked about that. People, I think that's absolutely something we should do.
Oh yeah.
You know, and we should do it like on Twitch.
I want to be there. I am like I would be so hyped for something like that.
I'd throw you a sub for sure.
Can that happen? Can that happen? I mean,
well, why not? You know, we should. You know what? I'll tell you when it should happen. March 22nd of this month.
Yes.
To celebrate Shatner's 90th birthday. I think you're absolutely right. I think we should absolutely have a Free Enterprise watch party, and I think that's a great idea. I think that is a great idea.
Yeah, we need that watch party, and we need you to get the rights back to the film so that you can do your final cut.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's just like the Snyder Cut. Who's going to pay for it? You know, at the end of the day, at the end of the day,
why don't you do like a crowdfunding?
The thing is, like, you can't crowdfund it if you don't own it.
Oh, once you own it.
I mean, well, then
would you have to crowdfund so you could own it?
Oh, I have a whole plan. I made a whole business plan about how you would go about doing it, and the first thing you'd have to do is I'd have to go to Mark Gottwald, who owns the movie, and say, look, Mark, what would you sell the movie to me for? And it would depend how much you would do it, because, you know, it's an old movie, and there's no high definition version of it. It has no value right now. And the thing is, the real, whatever the rights would cost to do what I want to do to the movie would basically cost $250,000. That's all in. So I'd have to buy the rights from him, whatever he would sell them to me for, plus $250,000.
Well, the ambassador here says, I'd love to see Free Enterprise myself. Sounds like a movie right up my alley.
Yeah, man.
Well, you can still, if you're going to watch it, don't watch any online versions because they're 4x3. At least get the Anchor Bay DVD that was released.
If you can find it, because it's hard to find now.
It's hard to find. And there's even a soundtrack album.
Yes.
And you know what? As a matter of fact, if you go to Spotify, the Free Enterprise soundtrack that I was particularly proud of because I helped produce that record, you can listen to the Free Enterprise soundtrack on Spotify, and here's something that's really cool. A lot of people don't know this. On the soundtrack CD, there was a secret track. So if you played the last song, it sounded like there was just blank space, that it was just over. There's 3 minutes and 22 seconds of blank space because Shatner's birthday is March 22nd. And then we actually took the scene from the movie where he tells this story that's only in the extended version that you have, and we turned it into a song. And on Spotify, they have it. They have the secret track. As a matter of fact, let's see. I don't even know what it's called. But if you go to Spotify, if you're a member, you have a Spotify account, you can look up Free Enterprise and the sound. I'm very proud of that soundtrack record. We worked really hard to get all that music. But the Shatner secret track, which I kind of want to do some kind of a music video for the secret track, because he tells a story that it's a story song, and it's on Spotify. And as a matter of fact, let me make sure that it's on Spotify, just so I can. It used to be. I want to make sure. Let's see. Yes, it is. The original motion picture soundtrack is there.
It's just amazing to me that the soundtrack is still available.
Oh yeah, and
but
it's
try and find a copy of the movie.
Oh yeah, no, and not many people. But at the end of it, William Shatner's self-effacing tale is what they called it on Spotify, which is funny because it never had a title on the soundtrack. But I think the soundtrack is really, really good. I would put the soundtrack to Free Enterprise up against any of your favorite soundtracks of the 90s. It might not be as good as Singles or The Crow, for instance, but I think it's really got some great late 90s stuff on it that's not grunge, but it's got 80s tunes on it, like The Cult and Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Duran Duran.
For Caesar.
Oh, so is it it's the story that he tells about the fire then?
Yes, turned into a yes.
Because that is actually a kind of a heartbreaking scene. So that sounds pretty neat. I haven't heard the soundtrack, so I'll actually hop on Spotify after the stream and check.
Yeah, go to Spotify and check it out because it's the last track. It's track 14. So yeah. It's funny to look back on that and go, wow, we did a soundtrack album, and I worked with my music supervisor to figure out what the order of the songs are going to be. Like we went through many different iterations of which song was going to come after. They're not chronologically in the movie, so we arranged it to be a great listening experience, and that was fun to do. So
with all of that, with all of the stuff that we've been talking about with Free Enterprise, how likely is it to happen, Rob? Where are we? I mean,
well, I think it should happen because I'm fired up. It's just a question about, like anything else, like money, and then the question is who's going to pay for it and how are you going to pay it back?
Well, because right now, if you were to have that new cut, it would logically probably go on a streaming service.
Yes. What I would do though is I would do like what certain video companies do. I would do a special edition 4K Blu-ray of it. So you'd have a 4K UHD Dolby Vision.
Arrow, put it on Arrow.
It could be Arrow or something, but I'd have to do it so then you'd sell it. It's kind of like what Don May does at Synapse when he did Suspiria, Dario Argento Suspiria. I mean, I think the most I could ever hope to sell worldwide, I'd be lucky if I sold 5,000 copies.
So you'll have to do it like how the people do with the distros, the small distros for like the gore horror films from Europe.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay.
And if I could sell 5,000 copies worldwide, which is a lot, that would be great because that could pay for the rights to the movie. But you can't do any of it. I can't go raise money for the film until I either own the negative or was in partnership with Mark Gottwald.
Hashtag release the Burnett cut. That is your guys' new hashtag. The Snyder Cut's coming. You guys can stop with all that. Now we got to get the Burnett cut put out, people.
And with that, we gotta say bye to Carlos because Carlos has to go. So thank you very much, Carlos, for being here, man.
Yeah, Carlos, I know you're sitting there going, "What the hell are you talking about?"
You know,
I appreciate you being polite.
It's a huge generational thing. Like I wasn't even a concept but when that movie was made, but I've been researching it just right now, and it looks like a lovely find, and I'll be sure to watch it. I just I don't have a DVD player that I could play it on.
No, but you can look at the clips on my YouTube page, and if you watch them in order, you'll get the idea. You'll get the gist.
Yeah, but like that's a lot of times on the ZodWriter Show that does happen, that generational difference. But it's something fascinating to listen to, and I wouldn't stop doing it for the world.
Oh well, thank you. It was good to meet you on the stream, though.
Yeah, it was good to meet you too. All right, bye.
All right, later, Carlos.
Take it easy, kid.
You know, that's another thing I have to say. I mean, I'm old. And even though I don't think of myself as being old, one of the great things about YouTube is to be streaming with people. I mean, to be an OG, an original geek, but to stream with people, I think our ages don't really matter.
Exactly.
Because we all like the same stuff. And I will say, you know, I was having a conversation with my mom, and my mom's like, I just think it's so good that all the things you liked when you were 8 years old, you still like now. And you have all of these friends, and you know people around the world, and they all like the same things that you did. Because when you were a kid, only you liked those things, and now everybody likes those things. I go, yes, Mom, that's true. But that's another thing, is that I've got friends of all ages all around the planet. It's pretty neat.
And your average gamer says no one has a DVD player other than Robert Meyer Burnett with his physical media.
I know.
I don't know. I mean, you can play
PlayStation
DVDs
5,
on your
bro.
PlayStation.
Come
You
on,
can
man.
play them on your PlayStation.
I still watch 80s horror movies on VHS, man. I will not watch like some Lucho Fulcio movies off my VHS player. I'm sorry.
Look, if they could release 11 Days and 11 Nights on Blu-ray, they can release Free Enterprise.
Well, yeah, it's not that they wouldn't. I think a lot of people would take it. It's just that it doesn't exist in 4K. There's no modern version of it. And I would love to go redo it, because I think I could make it the best it can be now. And it wouldn't be like, people wouldn't be like, oh, why did you fuck it up? I wouldn't fuck it up. I would just make it, it would seem new and fresh.
So you're not going to George Lucas Free Enterprise. You're going to
No. Well, I did that in 2006 by adding to the Logan's Run scene. I would. One of the things I want to do is, when I shot the Logan's Run scene, I shot it to be very surreal, and I didn't do that. It was too straightforward, and I've got all this extra footage to make it surreal, and I would add more to that because I think it would be fun. And then there's one sequence where Robert calls Audie England that isn't in the movie, and I think it belongs in the movie, and I think it would make the movie better, where he tries to reconcile with her, and it kind of sets up the ending of the film, and I miss that it's not in the movie.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's all I would add. But the rest would be the same, but tightened up and just made better.
Well, I'm hyped. I mean, it's like I said, this is, Free Enterprise is one of my top 5 films of all time. Robert Meyer Burnett, you've created a masterpiece that all of at least the 3 of us on this panel can relate to.
And that's all that matters. Just the 3 of us.
I just, what's funny? It's like what's great about, and that's what's great about, streaming with, having someone like Carlos. He's a young dude. He's getting into all of this stuff, learning, having that experience. And it's great to see, and I would actually be really curious to see what he would think of Free Enterprise.
No, I mean, it would be, you'd probably want to cancel me too, but I think that it is, the world has changed a lot. And on one hand, it's gotten a lot more progressive and inclusive, which I think is good. But in other instances, it's become very, I think, closed off a little bit.
Sure.
And I think in some ways there's a maturity level that it has been lost. I mean, on one hand, the idea of what it means to be human and have relationships and all that has been, I don't know. I think we're a little less adult than we might have been 20 years ago about certain things, and just about human nature and stuff that goes on. And it's interesting. It's interesting. But I know there's some things that are very problematic in the movie that people would not be happy that I put in there.
Well, I got to tell you that it meant a lot to me, because like a lot of these Snyder Cut kids keep putting up that they didn't know that anybody else liked BVS when they were younger. I was a Trekkie. I loved Star Trek. My Uncle Bruce got me into it. But the thing was, I never actually knew any other nerds that liked Star Trek, not even once at the comic book store, until like I really met ZodWriter. So when I saw your movie and it was about people who were into Trek more than Star Wars, it felt good, because I've always been in that camp. I like both. I do. I'm not going to lie. I do like
I always
both,
have to.
But Trek has always meant a little more to me personally.
Yes.
Well, the funny thing about, if you really think about it, Star Wars Star Wars changed my life. And I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times in the theater. And you know, I was there. I saw Star Wars opening weekend when I was a little kid, and it was the thing about Star Wars was sort of outside of me, like because it was space fantasy and you could think about it, whereas Star Trek was very much internal. I internalized Kirk and the fact that Shatner became sort of a pop culture. Like the thing is, we all know that Obi-Wan Kenobi was played by Alec Guinness in the first Star Wars, but I don't think any Star Wars fan today has an experience or a thought about Alec Guinness as a man or what he did or his career. Whereas William Shatner, as William Shatner, outside of being Kirk, he's a pop culture icon. Now he's somebody that people on Twitter are mad at. So William Shatner, even though he's Captain Kirk, he's also a real human being that you interact with. And I think that was what was part of it, is that the movie Free Enterprise is as much about us interacting with a man who played a character that we loved. I mean, the extent now you've got Ewan McGregor, who you can watch on the Graham Norton show, showing his lightsaber skills. But William Shatner, he's as much a character as a real person as Captain Kirk was as a character in Star Trek. So there is a difference. And I think the closest you would come to Star Wars now would be Mark Hamill. You know, Mark Hamill is a real guy, you know, and we know him because he's done the Joker and he's on Twitter, and we know who he is as a person. And when we made Free Enterprise, though, because Mark Hamill, his involvement with Star Wars was kind of gone, because in '99, when Free Enterprise came out, Phantom Menace was coming out, and Luke wasn't in it. And so we had Obi-Wan Kenobi back as Ewan McGregor, but it wasn't the same thing, whereas Shatner has been Captain Kirk since 1966, and it's now 2021. He's going to be 90. He's still Captain Kirk, but he's also on Twitter, which means as a pop culture icon and as a character, there in the geek world, I don't know if there's anyone like William Shatner that exists or will ever exist, who has bridged the gap of being this fictional character from my childhood and now is a very real guy that gets into it on social media with fans. So that's why I think he has a unique place
but I think
in the world.
It's great. I think William Shatner has earned the right to be able to say what he wants to say. It's to the point where it's like, my God, if you're 982 years old and you can't say your piece, it's like,
well, you know, it's so funny because William Shatner is the kind of guy that would like everyone. He would not care what kind of a person you are. He wouldn't care if you're black, white, straight, gay, trans, whatever. He would like you. He'd be the kind of guy that would sit down with you, all people from all walks of life. He would sit down with, have a meal with you, and he'd be the first guy to be like, tell me about yourself. He would be that way. Like, he's that guy, you know, and that guy drinks in life. We went to the Cannes Film Festival with him. I mean, he is amazing. And the fact that we now have people nowadays, like activists or people that get mad at William Shatner, he's like the last guy that anybody should get mad at, because look, what he's doing is no one should tell him what to do. He didn't even like it when people told him what to, like the old video, when he's recording the video game, they're trying to tell him how to pronounce sabotage, the thing that Howard Stern would play. You know, you got to earn the right to tell Bill Shatner what to do. So on social media, when people are telling him how he should be, he's like, look, man, I'm 90. I've lived a life. I've been reinvented a million times. I've done way more than you'll probably ever do in your life. And it's not that he's being a dick. He's like, why are you telling me how to live and how to speak and how to talk?
He's being factual. So
yeah.
And also, people don't understand that he is the first guy that is going to allow you to be you. He wants you to be you. Like, if he were to ever sit down and interview you, he would love it if you were to bring, he's the first person to be live and let live. And he'd want to know everything there is to know about you. because that's the kind of person he is. And it's so funny to me when I see people when people go after him on social media, or people don't understand, I'm like, it's all young people that had no experience of William Shatner. They might know him from The Practice or Boston Legal. And maybe they watch old Star Trek episodes that seem like they were from a different century, but they don't have an experience of him as like Rescue 911 or TJ Hooker or being a
Kingdom of the
pitchman.
Spiders.
Kingdom of the Spiders, The Devil's Reign, or they don't know. They don't. And it's such a, how many, I mean, if you look into our geek world, how many people go all the way back to the original Twilight Zone and the original Star Trek? The Twilight Zone was 1959 to 1964. Shatner was on 2 episodes. One,
Yes.
Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, written by Richard Matheson, directed by Richard Donner, who directed Superman the movie. How many people go back that far? Shatner, if anything, he is the most royal of the royal geek icons. Nobody can go back as far as he can. And he's still here at 90 kicking. Twilight Zone, Star Trek, Boston Legal, and The Practice, 2 Emmy Awards, even in the aughts and the early parts of the teens it's insane. You go back to the original Twilight, you're talking 1960. Actually, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet was what, 62? And then Star Trek. So you're looking at a guy who spans almost 60 years of American pop culture and geek, whatever.
And he still brings in the hits. It was just a couple of years ago. It was right before the late great Adam West passed away. They did that second Return to the Batcave film,
I know,
where Bill Shatner did the voice for Two-Face, and that was amazing because he missed out on being in Batman.
Yeah,
but they made up for it years later, which I think was wonderful.
Because Shatner would have been a perfect Harvey Dent for Batman in the 60s. That would have been awesome.
My God, it would have been. I mean, it's amazing to think that he got to do that. I mean, he was in Airplane 2. If you look at his career, it's unbelievable. And I think he has a very unique place, and that's why more than ever, I would love to get Free Enterprise a new audience. Maybe we'll see. I mean, maybe I can use my social media. If I get more subscribers or something, I could get, you think about it. Like if I look at how many subscribers I have on YouTube and I'm like, okay, I've got like 36,000 subscribers on YouTube. If I could get all my subscribers to give me $5, maybe that would be enough. But maybe I could buy the rights to Free Enterprise, and start from there, and then pre-order the Blu-ray or the 4K, and then I could work my way up. But maybe
wonderful.
I mean, that would be the kind of thing that I would want to do for Shatner's 90th birthday, which I can't believe it is in 20 days. I mean, if there's anybody that should be celebrated by our community, it's Shatner.
It's Bill.
Yeah, because he's still around and kicking, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see. I mean, that's why I kept saying, I remember the last time you and I talked about Free Enterprise 2, and it was just like, you want to do that. You want to do that movie soon. I know.
Can
you just go and just film all the William Shatner scenes, like, so that they're there?
I know. And he's still great. It'd be great to do it with him. Be great.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
I'm like over here literally geeking out about Free Enterprise once again, and I got Johnny here who also loves the movie, so it was just like the perfect topic to talk about. But I want to briefly bring up, if you've got a moment, can you talk a little bit about Tango Shalom, the movie that you edited?
Yeah, so okay, I produced and edited Tango Shalom, which everybody can see, by the way, tomorrow. Tango Shalom is being screened. It's being played on the Toronto Film. What's it? I just was let me see. Okay. So the Toronto Film Channel, they have an ongoing film festival. So it's torontofilmchannel.com, starting at noon tomorrow, between noon and 9 p.m. Pacific time. So 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time. So Tango Shalom is a movie that I produced and I edited and I post supervised, and I was the visual effects supervisor. It is a low budget indie spiritual quest family dance comedy fable. It's totally and the plot of the movie, it's a comedy, but it's about a Hasidic rabbi who has a dream, and he believes that God has spoken to him and says, look, you have to learn to dance the tango. But a Hasidic rabbi, he's married and he's got kids. He can't touch another woman because he's Hasidic. He can't. So how is he going to learn to dance the tango and heed God's words? And over the course of events, he meets a really hot, young, dancing tango instructor, played by Karina Smirnoff from Dancing with the Stars. She was on 20 seasons of Dancing with the Stars. And so he has to figure out, he's like, and it turns out they might be able to go on a dance contest and win a lot of money that solves their problems. But his wife doesn't want him to do it, and his community doesn't want him to do it. His friends don't want him to do it, but God wants him to do it. So what's he going to do? So he goes on sort of a spiritual quest. He meets a Catholic priest. He talks to a Muslim imam. He talks to a mystic from India, an Indian mystic, and he has to kind of figure out what's he going to do. Can he heed the word of God without sacrificing his religious beliefs, or is he damned? And so it was a low budget film shot in New York, and it's charming, I think, and it's got a lot of New York character actors in it. It's as far away from geeky stuff as you could possibly get. But I'm really proud of the movie, and I think my editorial work in it is some of the best work I've ever done. I love the soundtrack. The movie, I think the movie's very funny, and it was a challenge to make. But what's interesting is the first place it ever played was in Jaipur, India, which was in February. I'm like, or it was in January. I'm like, is this movie going to play like in India? In Jaipur, India? It was they loved it, and it won the Critics Award from the Jaipur critics. And I'm like, that's crazy. And then the next place it played was at the Anatolia Film Festival in Istanbul, Turkey, and it was nominated for Best Film. It came down. It was a finalist. I was a finalist for editor, and it was down for Best Film. We didn't win. I didn't think it would win because it's a comedy and it's low budget, but they loved it there too, which was interesting because you go from a Hindi culture to Turkey is predominantly Muslim, and there's a secondary character who's an imam in the film, and our Hasidic rabbi has a relationship with this imam, which is kind of nice. But the whole movie is about tolerance and inclusion and all that. So, and now it's been playing. It's playing all over the country, and it played in Montreal, where it won Best Comedy in Canada and Best Actor.
Damn, in Montreal, it got Best Comedy.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is crazy. So now it's in Toronto, and it might be theatrically released in Canada in April.
Oh wow!
I can't believe it. I'm just like, this is a really low budget comedy you'd think that a streamer would pick up at film festivals, and the fact that. I mean, when you work on something, I worked on this movie for years because it was a true low budget labor of love. We'd work on it when we can and finish it when we could and raise money and go. And I never knew what was going to. I'll tell you some of the funny things about this movie, which is sort of weird. So the director, we had a piece of Vivaldi music called Glory. It was a hymnal. And Vivaldi, the famous composer, and we used a recording from Deutsche Grammophon, which is a famous classical music label. But when you're editing a movie, you have to pay for that music. And we could never pay for the Deutsche Grammophon recording. So Gabe Bologna, the director, he's hanging out with a friend of his in New York. And it turns out his friend is the choir director at the Vatican, in Vatican City in Rome, and Gabe never really thought of this. So he's out with his friend. He's talking about the music, and his friend says, well, I'll just have one of the choirs come into the church and we'll record the Vivaldi music you need.
Wow.
And he goes, what? He goes, yeah, when I go back to Italy. He goes, just call me. So one day, as I'm editing the film, and one day I get this email, and it's a video of this. It's people that have come in, in Rome on their lunch hour. They come into this unbelievable church, one of the many churches in the Vatican, where they actually record choral music. So it's all set up to record. And it's like a 30-piece choral section. And they record Vivaldi's Gloria live in this church in the Vatican. And so they send me this video, and they also send me the file, the uncompressed AIFF file of the recording that they had mixed. I'm just like, they recorded music in the Vatican for us to put in our little independent movie? Yes.
That's
yes,
beautiful,
they did.
though. I mean, the movie itself just sounds wonderful, though. I mean, I like the actual groups of people you decided to have represented in the film. I think that is what is drawing a lot of eyes to it, because it is not a typical narrative that you see,
No.
portrayed with typical archetypes of people.
Yes.
You really have found some interesting characters to try and make this story about, and I'm sold. I want to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many weird things about the movie like that, and it truly is. It represents anything about independent cinema you've ever heard. It represents that. So I'm really excited about it, and I thought, we'd finish it, and you'd send it out to our film sales agent, and he would show it to distributors, and they would pick it up, and that would be it. We haven't shown it really to anybody except the people that are seeing it, and it just keeps traveling around the world. So obviously we want to sell it. We want it. We hope somebody will pick it up, and maybe a streamer, whether I would love to see it. I would love Amazon to buy it, because Bern Cohen, who plays the Grand Rebbe, the Grand Rabbi in the movie, he's in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel playing a rabbi as well. So it would be like, if you like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, watch Tango Shalom. It kind of fits in the same genre. So that would be my ultimate dream. But you work on these things. I worked on this movie for 5 years, on and off, and sometimes you think you're never going to finish it, but you do. You stick with it. And you do a million different things. I working on the Netflix show, and then, well, we got time to work on Tango Shalom. And Gabe, his father, who's in the movie, Joe Bologna, who was in movies like Blame It on Rio and My Favorite Year, and Joe Bologna, his dad, who co-wrote the script, he developed pancreatic cancer, and he died while we were making the film. And he's a co-star of the movie, and he co-wrote the movie. So we lost him. And while we were making the film, although he did see a cut of the film and was able to give us notes, but it truly was a labor of love. And Renee Taylor and Lainey Kazan, who was in My Big Fat Greek Wedding and a million other things, she's in the movie. And Renee Taylor, who is Fran Drescher's mother in The Nanny, she's in the movie too. And it was a crazy, it was like a home movie project that just kept going on and on and on for half a decade.
That's cool.
But hey,
you got a pretty good cast though for it too. It sounds like. I mean, not huge names, but at least people that you'll recognize when they pop in. You'll be like, "Wow, that's cool."
Yeah, it's that lady from that thing. Yeah, no, it's good. And then what was really fun is one of my fellow producer was actually Joel Zwick, who directed My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So he and I were two of the producers on the film, and it was really great meeting him. And I was really nervous, because when the first time we ever screened the movie for anyone, no one had seen it. Neither had he. And he came to that first screening because we wanted his notes. And I was terrified. I was, as the editor, and I was sitting in the back, like sweating bullets, wondering if he would like it. And the audience seemed to really respond to it. And because when you make a movie, you don't know how it's going to play. You want to show it to people, and not your friends. You want to show it to people in a way that maybe don't like you, because if you can win them over, if they give themselves over to the movie, it works. And when you make a comedy, you can tell if people laugh at the jokes or whatever. And when the movie was over, he raucous applause. He loved it. And I felt such a relief. I'm like, okay, thank God, because it's not for everybody. Like, as I said, hardly anyone I know is going to watch it, because it's as far away from any geek concerns as possible. But what was really interesting, there's an article that dropped today in UCLA's newspaper. Their student newspaper is called the Daily Bruin, and they did an article. They interviewed Gabe Bologna, the director of the movie. And the woman who watched the film, who wrote the article, she loved the film, and she's like 20. And I'm like, wow, that's unique. And she thought, again, like it was very necessary and that it has a good message and whatever. I just read the article right before I came on to this show. And I was like, wow, they really got it. And it's funny because when you work on a movie, you try and make it as good as you can make it, but you do it in a vacuum. And when you make a movie, you're making it for an audience. You're not making it for yourself. And it must work in the context of an audience. But when you're working on the film, you don't really know. And it isn't until you put the film in front of an audience that you know if it works or not. And I'm a big proponent of that, showing movies, and movies are very iterative. If they don't work, you go in and you reshoot things. Like I'll tell you, when I was cutting the film, at the end of the movie, these holy men that are in the film are a big part of the film. And the Muslim imam was not in the end of the movie. He sends a letter in. And I'm not going to ruin it for you. It's not spoiling anything. And one of the other characters reads the letter that he wrote. So the movie was all done. And I said to Gabe, the director, I said, you know what? I don't like the fact that our Muslim imam is not in the end of this movie. I said, what if we were able to go back and shoot scenes, which is something you never do on a movie. What if we could shoot an extra scene with the imam, the Muslim imam, and we see him writing this letter that he sent at the end of the movie, so we can have our one character start reading the letter, and then as a common device, you've seen it in a million movies, but suddenly then you hear the voice of the Muslim imam, and then we cut to him writing the letter, so it's as if he was there with these other religious leaders. Because I like that character so much, and I didn't want anyone to say, well, how come the Muslim imam isn't in the end of the movie? And now he has a presence there, and Gabe's like, that's a really good idea. Because when you're editing a movie, what you do is you cut all the stuff out that you don't like. I don't like this bit. And once you've cut out everything you don't like, hopefully what's left is the movie that you want to show. And this was the one thing about the movie that I didn't like. And I thought to myself, well, I can't fix it. As an editor, there's nothing I can do. And I said to Gabe, I'm like, what if we did this? He goes, dude, that's a great idea. We got to do that. So he went to New York, and the actor that plays the imam is actually a paramedic. His name is Yasir, and he's a paramedic, and he comes back, and this is like 4 years later. And he's like, you want me to what? And we're like, yeah. So they went and filmed it in this beautiful Moroccan restaurant. So it looked vaguely Middle Eastern. It looked beautiful. And they shot it. And then we didn't have any dialogue. So I said, man, we'll send you the letter. Just read it into your iPhone, and record it and send it to me. And then I did that. And so I was able to cut that footage in and cut his voice in. And so the very first time we showed the movie to an audience, that scene, those it was like 5 different shots, was in the end of the movie. And I sat in there, and the first time I saw them, because I'm looking at things on my computer, when I first saw it on this big screen and I saw how beautiful those shots looked, I'm like, wow, now there's nothing about this movie I don't like. Everything. And when I say that, do I think this movie's 2001 or Apocalypse Now or Lawrence of Arabia? No. It is a small, tiny indie movie that is an indie Jewish spiritual quest family dance comedy fable. That's what it is. It's almost like a home movie, but I'm very proud of it. And yeah.
That sounds exciting. You got me sold. I definitely want to watch it.
Well, you can watch it tomorrow from noon to 9. Noon to 9. I think it'll probably screen 4 times. So it's free all around the world at the torontofilmchannel.com. You log in there and it's just like a screen, but you can blow it up to full screen and watch it. It is a widescreen movie. And I'm very proud of the work that everybody
considered did. Part of the festival. Could you win wreaths from it being shown on there? You can? Yes. Okay, cool. Yes.
And it is part of that festival. We did win in Montreal, and they haven't given out. What they do is they have this, it's like an ongoing festival that runs all year, and they give out awards once a month to certain films, and then the films that win are put into this annual contest, or they're shown. I don't quite know how it works. It's really cool. I'm really impressed by what they did. But we first sent it to Montreal, and then they asked to put it in the Toronto portion of the festival. So Maybe we'll win something else. I don't know, but the fact that they're showing it and people can see it, it's great. And now there is a possibility, as I said, in mid-April, it's going to actually open in theaters all across Canada, which would be the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah, good luck. It sounds like a wonderful film. Like I said, it's really interesting archetypal characters you've picked, and yeah, it doesn't sound like anything I've seen before. So yeah, I'll definitely.
It's a funny little family comedy, and hopefully people like it. I'm just really proud of how it all came together, because it was a difficult ordeal to get it all done. And a lot of people, I think, would have given up. I wanted to give up at some point. I'm like, fuck this.
Yeah, what'd you say? 6 years, something like that?
Yeah, it was total. I mean, I worked on it in May. May of this year will represent 5 years that I've worked on the film.
Wow.
But the movie really wasn't finished. I mean, it wasn't finished until a couple of months ago. Until in December, I think I finally finished the end credits.
Oh wow!
So it's not like it's an old movie that was sitting on the shelf. I mean, it was finished 2 months ago, and then we shipped it off to India. So
and it looks like people see the love in it. I mean, you've already talked about the wreaths it's won from the festivals it's been to, and those wreaths that's some real stuff. I mean, that's good. That's very beautiful.
Well, tomorrow between 12 and 9. Check it out. Yeah.
Between 12 and 9. It's like,
I mean, there's not even any bad language in the movie. I don't think there's not one swear word in the film. It's totally a family friendly film. And it one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when our main character, his name's Moshe Yehuda, our Hasidic rabbi, he actually meets the imam for the first time, and they walk down the street in New York and have a conversation. It's one of my favorite things I've ever worked on, that conversation. It's simple and but I think in this day and age, seeing that kind of, people coming together of different faiths, and it's great. I didn't write it or anything like that.
Like the post-geek singularity.
That's exactly right.
Together.
It's exactly what it is. And it's funny that you say that. Now that you've, it is that. It is that. It literally encompasses. I think that's why I stuck with the movie, is because it kind of encompassed my whole worldview of every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And I think that people coming together and listening to one another. I mean, what I don't understand is, why can't people of different faiths be friends? Why does it have to be, well, I'm a Star Wars fan and you're a Star Trek fan, so we can't meet? I'm like, I grew up loving both. Yeah. I'm sitting in a room that is full of Star Trek and Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
I read both Marvel and DC and Image and Dark Horse, but somehow supposedly because I don't hate a certain film, that makes me a Marvel stan. And I'm like, that's not true. I actually like DC way better, but whatever, guys.
Come on, man. We can come together. We can come together. I'm just saying, both hot toys. One's DC, one's Marvel.
Amen. That would be a good fight, actually.
I know, right? I mean? I'm sitting there going, yeah. All right.
That is interesting. That you kind of got me there asking a question. Rob, do you think we'll ever see a Marvel versus DC movie?
Oh, okay. Here's my theory. Yes. And I'm thinking, like, obviously everybody wants to see Avengers versus JLA. But when I was a kid, one of the single greatest comic books I owned was the oversized Treasury edition of Superman and Spider-Man.
I've got that. I love that book.
The art is incredible. It's when you got it and you open it up, and I'm thinking to myself, I will bet you $1 million that somewhere in Kevin Feige's office, he has that. He has that Treasury edition. And I'm not saying they're going to do necessarily Superman and Spider-Man. You could do Hulk and
they
Batman.
Should. That's the one they should do.
I actually said on my stream, I said, before 2026, we are going to see a crossover in the theater with Marvel and DC, because if you think about what Kevin Feige does, and Kevin Feige's a genius because he loves his stuff. He's a huge geek. He worked on 13 Marvel movies before the MCU even started. Of course, as a matter of fact, he already knows what he wants to do. And if you think about the comics, you had the X-Men crossover with the Teen Titans early on. Darkseid and Dark Phoenix were together. You've had Justice League and Avengers, the George Perez drawn crossover. Are you kidding me? It would be, I guarantee you, at some point, and I don't know what form it's going to take, the fact that Kevin Feige has a deal with Sony, and Sony's making Morbius and Venom, and they have Spider-Man. Do you think anybody in their right mind, do you think, first of all, I was watching Jason Kilar, I don't know if it's Kilar, the guy who runs Warner Media.
Yeah.
He was tweeting the other day about Warner Brothers Stage 16, which is the biggest stage in the Warner lot. They built the shopping mall from Gremlins 2 in there. They shot part of Batman Returns in there. They shot so many things in there. It's one of the most legendary stages ever. And he was tweeting about that stage. If Kevin Feige were to have a conversation with him and said, bruh, what if we did a crossover movie? Who's going to say no? That guy who runs Warner Media, of all the studio executives, he's the one dude I think in Hollywood would take Kevin Feige's call and go, dude, let's do that shit. That'd be so cool. And they would work it out. They're the only two people, I think, in the history of Hollywood, Kilar and Feige, that could actually make it happen. And who wouldn't want to see that? I mean, obviously you want to see Justice League versus Avengers, but that would be so difficult in terms of that. But you know what? Who wouldn't want to be in that? At this point now, those people have so, other than, working for Joss Whedon maybe, but who doesn't have so much fun making those Marvel movies? Do you think that Warner Brothers, and can you imagine? I think it's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be. I have no inside knowledge. I don't know. But I honestly think before 2026, there will be a Marvel DC crossover movie of some kind. What that's going to look like, I have no idea. But I think it's going to happen.
Something like that could unite the fandom, or it could cause more friction.
I think it'd be so. I think people would be there for it because
depending on who you bring in to,
you know who I would get to do it. Even though he probably wouldn't, I'd get James Cameron to direct that. I think James Cameron, he was the first guy that was going to do a Spider-Man movie. I mean, who else? Either that or Steven Spielberg. Come on. A JLA Marvel, or not JLA, but let's make it Marvel DC crossover directed by Steven Spielberg. Bring in that Spielberg touch.
Nova and the Green Lantern, and a little kid Nova though from a couple years ago.
Yeah, but
Steven Spielberg, that would work really good.
I think you need a heavy hitter. I think you've got to go big. And I only think about my excitement about Spider-Man and Superman coming together because I think rather than putting a bunch of characters together, I think concentrating on two of your big guns and putting those characters together would be the better way to go because you could really delve into the characters and their relationship. And if you filled it up with too many people, we already had Infinity War and Endgame. And when I was watching those, it was so mind blowing. So I think if you brought these two characters together and if it worked, you could expand.
Yeah.
But that, if you go back and you look at that Spider-Man, Superman comic, it's so awesome. I mean, can you imagine someone like Henry
even
Cavill?
if they did like a straight up period piece where they adapted that story.
Yeah. I just think it would be so much fun now that the multiverse is in play, that if you did a film like that and, you've got Lex Luthor and Dr. Octopus, it would be so great. Listen, I must run. I have to go feed my dogs.
Yeah, we're about to wrap this up. I just didn't want to cut you off there, Rob. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being here. Johnny, you had something?
I have one question I wanted to ask you all night because I was checking out your Instagram and I saw a piece I absolutely love, and I want to know if you made it. The Crash Friends picture. Did you make that, or did somebody make that for you? Because I absolutely adore that.
The which one?
It's for the film Crash by David Cronenberg. With
no, those are the here. Those are I have. These are. This is the German media book. This is the first 4K version of Crash that was released.
Okay.
And then this is the Criterion version of Crash that came out. And then over there, I've got the Arrow version of Crash. So I have all 3 versions of Crash that were released.
Okay. Well, you had the picture that it had like Cronin, it had Spader and the 2 girls, and I think Christopher Maloney, and it looked like the Friends logo, and it really cracked me up.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't make that. Somebody made that. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
That was so good.
I love that.
I'm a huge Cronenberg fan myself, and I really like that film. It's one of his hidden gems. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, wow, that's hilarious. I didn't know anybody else liked that film. So
loved it. But I must run, gentlemen.
Thank you again for being here, Rob. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
It was so much fun. Thanks for letting me ramble on. I hope everyone's
and we'll be watching. I'm going to be watching Tango Shalom tomorrow. I can't wait.
Check it out. Tell me what you think.
No problem.
All right, man. I'll see you guys later.
See you later. That was great. What did you think, Johnny?
Oh, great dude, man. Really awesome, really funny. And he gets it. He just understands the world like a nerd our age would. Or I don't know. He's a little older than we are. I couldn't tell, like he kept saying he was old. I'm like, Jesus, dude, I feel old too. So, but I love the guy. He was great. He was really awesome.
That was definitely great. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and wrap up tonight's episode of the ZodWriter Show. It was a fantastic episode with our good friend Robert Meyer Burnett. If you haven't had a chance to watch it all, you guys can, of course, check out the replay. And we are going to be back here next week. Wow, I just have to say that was a fantastic show. So thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody for being here. Good night, everyone.
Pow pow.